We normally don't, but we can.
Welcome to the Plan Commission meeting for December 16, 2014. For those that have not been to a meeting before, the way things work in these gatherings is the city staff presents on an item. We then have technical questions for the members of the Plan Commission. Once we're done with our technical questions, we open it up to the public to speak. If you have something to say about an item, we ask that you step up to the microphone and state your name and address so we have that for the minutes. And then please try to stay as close to the subject as possible. Once public commentary is over, we go back to the commission for discussion and a vote. I would also ask that people silence their cell phones so that it doesn't go off during the meeting. And with that, let's call the roll.
David Borsak.
Present.
Ed Bowen.
Here.
Jeffrey Tomes.
Here.
Thomas Freitag.
Here.
John Hens.
Here.
Steve Cummings.
Here.
Kathleen Propp.
Here.
Gary Gray.
Here.
Donna Laurie. Robert Weigert. Carl Nolenberger.
Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes from December 2nd. Do we have any corrections or additions or deletions to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion clearly passes. Let's move on to item number 1. Presentation regarding Oshkosh Riverfront Visioning Project, Let's Be Pioneers by East Central Regional Planning Commission. Gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioners, for some time on your program this evening. We need to switch that to the computer screen, or there we go. My apologies, as we thought we'd be in the normal room with a larger screen, so it might be a little difficult to see or read what's on the screen, but we will give you hard copies of the report summary at the end here, so you will have everything in front of you. I'm Eric Fowle, by the way, Executive Director with East Central Regional Planning Commission. I brought Ben Krumenauer with me, who is now an employee of East Central, previously worked for the city. We thank you for training him so well. The good news is you can tap into his expertise by virtue of the county being a member at East Central, so he's not completely removed. Our project here was to really look at Oshkosh and help the city better understand its riverfront and the feelings towards it, if you will, from the general community. Obviously, Oshkosh is in a very strategic location along the shores of Winnebago and the Fox River within Winnebago County, and that's my reminder to inform you that the reason that we're able to help out in this project is Winnebago County's membership. So we're able to do small-scale projects like this at no cost to communities that reside in our member counties. The riverfront is obviously a key feature within the city and experiences a lot of changes over time in terms of land use and function. The city of Oshkosh is really no different than many other riverfront communities out there where there's typically an old industrial base, and over time those businesses go defunct or for other reasons move out of the area, no longer rely on the water that's there, and we see a fair amount of blight and other conditions along riverfronts. We've seen a resurgence in communities moving back towards the river and kind of turning their face towards the river. Oshkosh is not an exception to that, and you've had a number of good things happen. I think it's fair to say that part of it might look a little piecemeal at times, and what the charge here was to develop information that could help develop a more holistic vision for the riverfront corridor. And so we embarked on a process, if I can get the buttons right, that we entitled Let's Be Pioneers, and that was intentional, a little nod to the folks who settled the land originally and invoked some transformational change on the landscape, as well as the timing of the Pioneer Resort property, which certainly has been in the headlines and is kind of a sore point in the community. Certainly an opportunity exists there. We established 3 public workshops and had them all at facilities along the riverfront, the conference center, the senior center, and outside along the river walk, which turned out to be a really warm day. But it was nice to be in an outdoor environment, interact with people. We did those meetings 3 consecutive Wednesdays, 2 of them in the late afternoon, early evening, and 1 during the lunch hour, so we could try and tap into some of the business folks in the downtown area. In general, I think we felt they were quite successful. We had 72 documented individuals attend the 3 events, and when I say documented, that's what we can prove by the sign-in sheets. We know there were more in attendance. Some couples just signed in as one person, for example. So kind of on an estimated base, we figure there was about 90, maybe even close to 100 people that attended the meetings. It was pretty evenly split, about 25 to 30 at each, although a few less at the outdoor one over lunch than we had expected. Not bad in terms of this kind of process. You're never going to get hundreds and hundreds of people, but we think we've got significant feedback from that rather small group. The geography of the attendees is interesting as well, and the distribution, if you can see the map well enough, the green dots on this map identify the distribution of participants at all 3 workshops, and it's spread out quite a bit. It looks like we've got a variety of people from different backgrounds, economic strata and the like. So we kind of feel that there's some good, valid information in this. This is not meant to be a scientific study or looking at making it scientifically accurate, but it does give a good gut feel, if you will. So we're going to give you a bit of an overview of some of the exercises that we developed and worked through participants with, and then a summary of the results. We kind of stop at giving real formal, hard recommendations with this kind of material because a lot of it is subject to interpretation, and you know the community better than we do and can probably infer things better than we can. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben, who will take care of a couple elements, and we'll jump back and forth on this.
Great. Thank you very much. The first exercise that we had was here. It's called Who, What is Oshkosh? And it was really just a sit-down of talking about what Oshkosh is in 3 different pieces. Really the past, the current, and the future. So the past being the historic. What exactly do you view Oshkosh was? The current. What's its culture? Tell us a little bit more about how Oshkosh interacts in your life at this present time. And then the future, the vision. Where do you see Oshkosh going? We really wanted the residents and the community members in the area to talk about what they'd like Oshkosh to be. What is their grand appeal? Without money being an issue, without anything like that, tell us what you'd like to see. So we opened it up for that conversation. And what we got was over 650 individual responses in the 3 different areas. So what we did is we broke those down, quantified them, got them into numbers talking about what we saw for common traits in both the past, the current, and that future. We made it really important to focus on the future identity. That's really why we're here. We're here to look at the vision of what we can do. So in that red portion, there were a couple ones that did highlight out. And again, I apologize for the small screen here, but these are listed within the document that we'll be providing you also. But some of the big ones are pretty obvious ones. The importance of mixed use, recreational, redevelopment of the riverfront corridor. It's the importance of seeing that the number one thing is mixed use, large development with redevelopments on that corridor. Let's focus on the river. And that's why we were there that day. So that was pretty common. Other ones that came in there about midway through the list were parks and green space. We recognize that there's an importance to that on that river, and it shouldn't all just be paved. Residents also felt that business developments were important. And this is actually a pretty encouraging one also. At number 10 on the list, boating hub for Winnebago Pool Lakes. They recognize that boating is a very important part of our community, and they saw that as one of them. So to keep going forward in that momentum, we have a couple of these key points again. Again, the one I want to emphasize is that we had over 650 individual responses for this. And that's pretty impressive over that 3-workshop period. And those common themes, I'm going to just refer to some of the ones again in all 3 sections. The lumber industry. We have a big history in that lumber area, and that was obvious with the residents' thoughts. Event City, they're happy to see that current cultural activity, and they want to keep seeing that going. And again, for the future identity is that mixed use. They really enjoy that recreational redevelopment along that riverfront and lake corridor. So I'm going to hand the mic back over to Eric, and he's going to finish up with the next section here.
Second exercise was entitled Influence and Confluence, and we're basically asking the question about how do people feel the river connects or doesn't connect to areas surrounding it. How far does that influence of the river go when you're doing that. We often take a look at planners at defining study areas, and we're going to look at this area, and we don't have a lot of basis for that sometimes, honestly. We figured it'd be good to ask the community, how do you define the riverfront, and how would you draw a boundary that would describe the riverfront area to you? So this is a real interesting exercise, and I did not go with the animation to bring up each little layer one at a time, which kind of adds some flair to it. But looking at just one workshop, this is a composite of all of the different boundaries that were identified at that workshop. There's a number of bubbles listed there and some comments that people had offered as well associated with that boundary. Actually too small for me to read, so you'll read it in the report. But a lot of different ideas and opinions on what constitutes the riverfront. The second workshop, a little less attended, but you can see again, that one has a little more consensus. Lines are a little tighter towards the river. Somebody looked at a boundary that extends well beyond the river. And the third one, probably the messiest of all, the most responses to it, as well as the bubbles and the comments about specifics relating to that boundary. But when you take a look at all of them, all responses in aggregate, while it looks like a mess from this perspective, you can start to see some patterns that get generated. So if we kind of simplify that map, make those lines a little thinner and all one color, you can start seeing where those lines coincide with one another. Obviously, a lot of folks seem to think the rest of the waterfront, Lake Winnebago, constitutes part of that river as well. So we took a stab at trying to figure out where the most responses fell within that boundary and generated what we called a consensus boundary. Although there are two areas on either side of the river that we would expect folks here to have more conversation about if you're going to use this boundary for any type of official use, and that being the downtown area as well as the area highlighted in yellow to the south. Just a little bit difficult to tell from the data on do people really think that that's associated with the river, or is it separate? There may be some other things that need to come into play, so we highlighted them as areas to consider. So some of the key points there. Number one, we had 68 individual responses on the maps to that exercise, which is certainly good and made for enough work to draw all those things out and trace them. The boundary obviously included many of the shoreline areas of Lake Winnebago, from Menominee Park down to Fugelberg Park on the south. And so when you're just talking river, I think you need to expand that thought and the concept to include the shorelines along Lake Winnebago. And maybe you do, maybe you don't in your minds at this point, but I think that'll be important moving forward. And then we noted the two areas to the north and south where some more conversation might be needed as if and how those are attached to how you define the riverfront. What's their level of connectedness to that? So again, just a clean map here so you can kind of get a better visual of what was looked at as the riverfront boundary. Move into exercise 3, which we entitled Connect the Dots. This also had to do with connectivity. And while the river is a finite feature that is in close proximity to shorelines and people understand that influence of it, there are many opportunities to better connect areas well beyond that to the river. It is an area that invites people to it, and I think just by its nature draws interest from folks, whether they're residents or visitors, and is something that perhaps can be capitalized on more in the future by the city. So we simply had maps out there and asked folks to either put points on there, dots to identify locations, and arrows showing connectivity and the routes, perhaps conceptually or very specific, that they think those connections should happen. Well, many of the things on the maps were identified as physical connections, i.e. it might be good to have a bike path or a better way to get from point A to point B, better connecting neighborhoods or some parks to the riverfront. Some of these might be a little more conceptual and actually deal with social or economic conditions or connections as well. So this was the composite map from the first workshop. Second workshop, quite a bit different. We're kind of pleased to see a lot of different perspectives in each workshop and not everything being the same. A lot more focus on this one with areas connecting to the west towards the town of Algoma. And the third one, again, a bit of a different pattern. Interesting, the number of comments submitted with this, and all those comments are in the report, but I think a general feeling that for visitors and passers-by going on the 41 corridor, while they may know there's a river in Oshkosh, they may not know what's there, or that it's actually a destination, or could be a destination. So trying to funnel more traffic from EAA, from other events and activity along 41, and kind of say, hey, we've got this other thing near downtown, you should get off the highway and check it out, is kind of what some of the results were saying to us, is that there's probably some promotion opportunity there. So this was the aggregate map, the composite of all of them, and kind of gives you a better sense of the multitude of connections that could be made in the future to the river. So again, some of the key points. General feeling that there ought to be increased connectivity of the river walk along both sides of the river. A lot of comments, a lot of lines drawn right along the riverfront. So the extension of those facilities over time would be beneficial. An improved connection between Menominee Park and the riverfront came about. Improved connections to downtown and the near south side business areas from the riverfront, obviously trying to feed off of any activity that might occur along the river. Increased attraction of visitors to EAA, Highway 41 shopping areas, directing them to the river through wayfinding and other means might be beneficial as well. And then lastly, commented more than once, specific desire to see a boardwalk path along Lake Winnebago south of the Pioneer Resort property. I don't know how many of these ideas are new ideas or old ideas, but nonetheless, we wanted to make sure these were all in there and shared with the Plan Commission. Exercise 4, again, was fairly simplistic, called Places and Spaces. It's always an interesting question to ask people, what's your favorite place in a given location? And of course, the river being the focus here, and getting them to identify things that they like and keeping things positive. So we'll talk more about great places, but obviously there's a lot of things down there that contribute to the river already being a great place in some people's minds. So we put maps out, asked participants, actually they're air photos so you can see a lot more detail, but we put the maps out, had participants use green dots to identify the locations they felt were great places or features. And we did this in a manner where the bigger the dots, sort of the bullseye target type of dot, indicates more mentions. And certainly a lot of commonalities amongst the three workshops in terms of the Pioneer Resort property, whether they thought historically that was a great place or it's still a great place as far as a location, is for you to infer. Some people identified some broader corridors, the Main Street corridor being one of them. So a wide variety of features and places. Second workshop, fairly similar. A lot of places along the riverfront, a little higher intensity of favorite places towards the downtown, the Leach Amphitheater, Ground Round, and other facilities, Beckett's and the like. And this was the third map. So when you look at a composite of all of these, there's a tremendous number of assets that you have out there already along the riverfront or near the riverfront, things that people embrace and that ought to be considered as changes occur so you don't inadvertently or advertently remove things that people admire. This is something we've been preaching for quite a number of years now as a community as we work with them, and that's the concept of placemaking. And this is really gaining traction, particularly in urban settings where you're looking for a vibrant space and a vibrant place. And there's formal research on this and concepts called placemaking that identify the different pieces and components that go into making a great place. It's not an exact science, but it's something I think the city's going to want to get themselves more familiar with as you move forward with master planning. So some of the key points is that we had well over 150 individual features and locations that were identified. Those by default are obviously considered to be important by that group of people who participated, perhaps the community as a whole. And many of those features contribute significantly to the overall sense of place that your riverfront provides. If you think about riverfront communities, they're not all the same. Each one has some uniqueness to them. The Nenas and Menashes and Oshkoshes, not the same riverfront. They're used differently, they're treated differently. So we're not saying you need to do something that looks the same as everybody else. It should be truly unique and truly Oshkosh when all is said and done. And you'll want to keep those things in mind as you move forward. Exercise 5 was kind of the complete opposite. We asked people about their favorite places and things they like. The fifth exercise was looking at things that need to be fixed, things that are not so great out there. So it gave people a chance to tactfully vent, if you will, while still keeping things positive. So again, looking at the 3 workshops, we've got a fair number of features that have been identified in each. Pioneer property, I believe it's the Buckstaff property, were 2 in this one that kind of raised to the surface saying, these are eyesores, something needs to be done with these properties, take better advantage of their locations. Second workshop, a little different pattern, some commonalities amongst points. Some of these, or most, are labeled where labels were provided. You can't see them here, but in the report they are. And then the third one, a little bit different pattern and even identifying some very broad areas that they felt were in need of help. Most of these areas I think you're probably familiar with or have similar feelings, so this may help confirm some of that, or it may identify some new things that you weren't aware of. But as you look at the aggregate map of all the workshops, there's plenty of points out there of things that need some help. So again, key points. Several themes, several sites rank highly amongst those that participated. Those would include the Riverfront Trail, Riverwalk connections. Many people put dots on places where there's gaps in a trail. They'd like to see that fixed. Direct access to the water for watercraft and recreation, feeling that there may be limited opportunities for direct access to the water. Many comments on vegetation management along parts of the river, perhaps the trail, areas that might block views and such, so you want to handle those things quite delicately and balance them. And then, of course, redevelopment of numerous sites, including Pioneer Resort, Buckstaff site, the Geldwin site, Axel Tech, and Marion Road were the big ones that came up. So moving on, the last exercise, I'll hand it off to Ben again.
So while the first 5 exercises really focused on getting to the riverfront, getting to downtown Oshkosh area, and talking about the larger areas within the city, exercise 6, how intense, or the big ideas, focused on actually getting recommendations from these residents about what the space could look like structure-wise. And then the big ideas, again, were those grand visions. So when we get into this section, it really focuses, again, on how the structures could look like. We provided this survey with 4 different sections, ranging from residential, commercial, parking, and the fourth one escapes me, I'm sorry. But within each one, there was different sections that they could choose on for different densities, sizes of buildings, how large, and things like that. Starting with the first one was the housing. So what we've chosen to do with this presentation is only focus on the number 1 option, and I'll still mention some of the other ones that were not as well recommended. Some of the key points for Housing C was the focus on small multifamily housing. This means some multifamily uses, but not the large multifamily structures or the single-family residential structures within that riverfront area. Part of the reason that they looked at this one is that as we look in a mixed-use environment, housing is still one of the options that we want to talk about. So it was interesting that they did choose the smaller multifamily housing for that. When we get into the second one, the retail, this wasn't really that surprising. It focused on showing an ongoing preference towards the mixed-use developments, the larger mixed-use area. Other ones that did not score very high overall on the 0 to 4 rating system was things like big box developments. Big box, they figured, or they thought, were better suited for more of the highway corridor area and not in the downtown area. Another one that did not score quite as high as the mixed use was the single structure commercial or retail uses, the single box structures like that. They really wanted to see that mixed use, maybe commercial, industrial uses in there, and then also maybe some residential on the upper floors or office space. Employment, this was that one that I couldn't remember. Employment options, these are the larger office style structures. They really enjoyed option C. This was the larger office space, but not what we considered those campus-style structures. So those large, multi-thousand employee office structures were not as well received as some of the smaller office uses. Comparable in size may be that 50 to 250 employee range, not the single or two employee businesses, nor those 1,000 employee businesses. And that fourth one was the parking. As you guys are going forward with your parking study in the Oshkosh area, or moving towards that process, this is an interesting one that we were able to provide some help with. The residents overall felt that parking option D was the best one. Parking options A, B, and C focused on street parking or parallel parking or parking lots, just surface parking lots, while option D focused on the larger structures. Overall, this was very highly received, and multi-level parking options were that best one. And part of the reason for this is because the community members in some of their comments stated that it was important to maintain as much space for things other than parking. Parking is kind of seen as a negative growth, but a necessary growth within the area. So parking structures can help to increase the parking density while still providing multiple levels of other commercial or something other growth on that first floor. The second half of it, and this was one that I was really excited for personally, is how intense. Give me those big ideas. What do you see happening that coincides with the vision, the future? These are the big ideas. So participants were simply asked to express their concerns. Again, money was not an option at this point. Just tell us those great ideas. So here are some of the big idea areas. In the bubbled areas, you can see where they're focused on some of these portions. Not only did they see importance with connecting to existing uses such as the Tribal Heritage Trail, but also just the riverfront itself. Residents wanted to see big ideas on those areas. So this was from the first exercise, or for the first vision session. In the second one, we can actually see some of the recurring themes. That bubble on the bottom half of the Beadlemore Bridge shifted to the top, so they recognized that some larger growth options could be there. But again, the riverfront corridor was still a big area for some big visions. And then third, we see it all downtown, focusing on the riverfront. A lot of the residents stated that they were really happy about the riverfront developments on the north side of the river, but were hopeful to continue that growth on. One of the big ideas they said was to continue that south of the Pioneer Island. And as we bring it together, we can again see it coincides very closely to what residents feel is the map or the riverfront corridor, or that where they perceive as being the riverfront area.
Well, quite a lot of interesting information generated out of it, and like I said, a lot of it is subject to interpretation, probably more so by you as the Plan Commission or city officials and staff versus us who assisted on the project. But any plan out there, any vision without execution is only a hallucination. A phrase I learned a couple of weeks ago. I thought it very applicable in this format. So helping to establish the vision is one thing, but moving forward, we think this will provide a very good guide as the city moves to the next steps of more formal master planning, where you start getting into a number of details. And we put a chapter in here that talks briefly about perhaps how this plan ought to be used in that context. And so I'll go very quickly through this, but I want to remind folks again, this was not looked at as being scientific data. It's sort of a random reality check. For that time period. Things could change next year if you have a different group of people, but we think there's some validity in the amount of information, the kind of information that was generated. Seems to make fairly good sense, and that most folks in the community would agree with those things. We do start seeing patterns in our experience. Once you start seeing some patterns and multiple people start putting ideas on maps or talking about it, they can gain momentum, and you want to keep that momentum. So we encourage you to be very critical about the information in this document, but also use it as a springboard, if you will, to keep conversations going as you go into the master planning process. A few points we wanted to make is when you do start master planning, we think there's enough info here to make an argument that the concept of placemaking ought to be an overarching theme that is integrated into that master plan. And I think any good consultant will know about that concept and will realize that while you're doing a corridor-wide plan, you have to think about the details and the small spaces and places in between. We'd also want you to consider utilizing that consensus boundary developed in exercise 2, perhaps with additions to the north or the south as you see comfortable, perhaps being the study area for that master plan, or utilizing it or parts of it or some form of it as a boundary in other studies that might be done. It could range from looking at TIF districts to business improvement districts, recreation plans and the like, but I think you've got pretty solid information about how people associate with the river and to what extent away from it, so it should be helpful in that sense. The connect the dots exercise, a lot of the comments and things drawn on the maps dealt with physical connection. So you immediately need to start looking more closely at existing transportation plans that have been developed or approved in your comp plan, or as you look at updating those individual plans, go back to this document. Take a look at every single line on there and think about connectivity and how that could be achieved and by what mode and what benefit you would get out of that. Fourth, locations in that places and spaces, the favorite places exercise. Really think it ought to be evaluated more and kind of dive into the details about specifically what that is on the map, where it is, and talk about protection, conservation of those areas, perhaps enhancement or improvement, or even replication of some of those types of features along different parts of the corridor. There's obviously a lot of good things out there. You can put more good things and keep that in mind, the more vibrant your riverfront is going to be. The opposite, the let's fix this items that were identified, really should be of utmost importance. I mean, that's where you kind of get the gut check and people spilling their concerns out. And we would recommend that you take a look at each and every one of those points and the notes on there, decipher it as best as you can, and see if there's some short-term ways to address or fix that, whether it's through capital improvement programming, if it's infrastructure, or how do you address those points in a longer-term plan, such as the master plan. Some of these things may take 20 years to fix, i.e. a redevelopment site. But there could be some very simple fixes that show progress in a short term. The land use preferences that Ben had gone through certainly speak volumes as far as the intensity of development that folks may be comfortable with. And we would recommend trying to stay within that. Varying to a certain degree may be acceptable, but you'll be a better gauge of the acceptance to that. And those things ought to be integrated or used as a starting point when you take a look at the master plan. I don't think you need the consultant to come up with a bunch of different standards or criteria or why they're looking at intensity this way here and that way there. That work is kind of done here and gives them a starting point. Obviously, you could also use that for future zoning regulations and other things that are a little more dictatorial once you start getting the rubber to meet the road on projects. The last point is the big ideas. People wouldn't put those ideas out there unless they had some level of faith in them. Not our job to evaluate the feasibility of them, but we would recommend that at least at a staff level, they be taken a look at, all of them, and really talked about and figure out what's possible. Not too many bizarre ideas, I would say. Sometimes you'll get some really weird things that come out of this. A couple of things that come to mind is there was one suggestion that you take some of the river downtown and basically pave the whole thing over to create more space for development. Interesting. Voters might not appreciate it, but you can even take a weird idea like that and start talking about it and massaging it and come up with something that might work based on that concept. I think there was another idea about maybe having a water taxi or towards the Highway 41 bridge where the expanse is more as a method to get back and forth across the river. So a lot of neat things in there, but you're going to be the judge on those. So with that, we will end the presentation. I want to give a special thank you to the City Planning Department and Community Development Department staff that helped out. They helped out from start to finish. This was a collaborative effort, even though we sort of had the model. They did a lot of the legwork on this in terms of helping to promote it, helping to facilitate tables, and we appreciate that. It'd be nice if it was that way in every community we worked with. So with that, we will stop. If there's any questions, we're more than happy to ask those, but otherwise we'll hand out the reports, and we will make sure that additional copies of the reports get to Darren, and I'm guessing by or before week's end it'll be published online as well.
Yeah, you're going to send me the digital stuff.
Yes, yes.
Thanks. And I'd like to thank Eric, too, and the staff at East Central, and my former staff at East Central for helping out on this project. I think it was truly a collaboration, so we thank Eric.
Questions? Or do we just want to, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I think the presentation by East Central Wisconsin Regional Commissioner was very good. The question I have for city staff is what's next? From the current point of view of the staff, what's next? What's the next steps?
Well, I think we're going to need to figure out how to use this report yet. And I think there's already some ideas that we have of incorporating some of the provisions into the updated zoning ordinance, as far as some of the recommendations that they have in here. Maybe even drawing some of those future zoning district lines. We could base it off of some of this. I think we're really going to start looking at this as we move forward next year with developing those master plans for the south side of the river and north side of the river. We'll be able to incorporate some of this information into those.
Okay, so it's basically, this would be somewhat of a supplement. I'm not saying one way or other, but, it's basically a supplement for the updating of the comp plan and the zoning code, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I think we can use it in various capacities, yes.
Okay.
Other questions from the commission right now? David?
I'm not sure if you stated as such, but were there 2 or 3 things that really surprised you, or?
It's such a wealth of information, it doesn't stay in my brain that long, to be honest with you. There's a lot of neat things in there. I think what impressed me the most was the ability of people to think a little bit outside the box, and some of the answers we got back weren't quite what we thought would be determined to be acceptable. The mixed use concept, the level of intensity of development, I think is sort of a new phenomena in terms of acceptance. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, usually not the case of having that intense development. You have the luxury of having the downtown adjacent to the river, which I think is helpful in this case. But times have changed, economic conditions have changed, demands from baby boomers to millennials have changed, and we're seeing much more intense development in those urban areas, something that we've been preaching as planners for 20 or more years at least, but now folks are finally coming around. So that's one thing that sticks out in my mind.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate your time. Feel free to call if you've got questions. We'll get some extra reports in the digital to Darren, and please to follow up on anything you've got concerns or questions on.
Eric, can I get a copy of the PowerPoint too?
Yeah.
Thanks.
We've received a request to move item number 3 ahead due to some time constraints. Is that okay with everybody? Sure. All right, let's do it then. We'll move on to item number 3. Conditional use permit for an extension of an existing telecommunications tower located at 1821 Jackson Street, where the Dollar Tree is located.
Bear with me a minute.
Oh, that's okay, Joe. Sorry.
Designated center.
Okay, sorry about that delay, and I'm ready to go. And Sitel Wireless, representing Cellcom, is requesting a conditional use permit to construct a 35-foot extension to an existing 45-foot telecommunications tower located at 1821 Jackson Street. Up on the screen, I have an existing land use map of the area with a subject site located in the middle. The subject site is a 2.05 acre property, currently zoned C2 General Commercial District, formerly known as formerly was the Knights of Columbus Hall, which last year was redeveloped to the current Dollar Tree retail store. Let's see. Here's a close-up aerial of the site. The property has triple frontage both on Wisconsin Street and Jackson Street, as well as a little segment of Stillwell Avenue on the north side. In addition to the retail store, the site's developed with off-street parking area, landscaping, green space, and the subject improvement, the existing 45-foot telecommunications tower, which is located at the southwest corner of the property fronting on Wisconsin Street. The tower is located within a 25-foot by 30-foot leased area leased by Cellcom. The general vicinity surrounding the area is mostly a mix of commercial and service uses to the south and east and west, transitioning to residential uses to the northwest as far as the south on the south side of Murdoch Avenue. Let's see here. In 2000, the Oshkosh Common Council denied an initial request by Cellcom for construction of an 80-foot cell tower, which coincided with recommendations from the Plan Commission and city staff. At the time, the denial was based on concerns about the aesthetics of constructing an 80-foot tower, negatively impacting the surrounding areas, and fears transmissions would interfere with electronic infrastructure of the surrounding businesses. The Common Council later approved the following month for a modified request which shrunk down the tower to a 45-foot tower, which was constructed in 2001. The tower per code was required to allow 2 additional carriers on the tower, and in addition to the cell tower, additional accessory equipment was constructed within that 25-foot by 30-foot area, consisting of equipment racks and cabinets, and screened by a 6-foot tall solid fence with a vegetative screen along the westerly and northerly portions of the fenced-in area. Nightcell is requesting a 35-foot extension to the existing 45-foot tower to total, which would be a total of an 80-foot tower. The petitioner states in the narrative that the current demand for 4G services has increased to the point that the current tower can no longer provide the coverage adequately to their customers in the area, and the proposed new tower height and upgraded equipment will expand their coverage and absorb a lot of capacity from surrounding cell tower sites they have in the city. The petitioner feels, based on their narrative, that the increased tower height will have a negligible visual impact to the surrounding area and the neighborhood. The petitioner did provide several renderings from 4 different vantage points, kind of depicting what the proposed tower height will look like. These renderings have been included in your staff report. Unfortunately, on these screens, it looks a little small. On the screen here is one vantage point looking south from Wisconsin Street, on the left side being the existing cell tower location, and on the right side, the depiction showing what the proposed 35-foot extension would look like. Next screen is a vantage point looking easterly from Murdoch Avenue, again showing on the left side the current tower height and the proposed tower height. And next one is a vantage point from Jackson Street looking due west, again with the lower 45-foot tower and the 80-foot tower. And lastly, they provided a vantage point looking north from the intersection of Hobbs Street and Wisconsin Street, looking north. This one's kind of hidden by existing trees, and showing the existing tower and proposed tower height. In addition to the renderings, the petitioner did make an effort to contact the surrounding businesses and property owners. They sent out a questionnaire to these owners explaining the project and asking for feedback if they were not opposed to, opposed, or indifferent to Cellcom's proposed project, increasing the tower height. Nine property owners responded. 7 of those were not opposed to the proposed project, shown in green on the screen, and there were 2 property owners in opposition to the proposed cell tower increase. The reasons given for their opposition included not having enough information on the proposed project, fear that property values would decrease, and potential health risks associated with transmission signals. If approved, the petitioner has no immediate plans to alter the screened-in area where the equipment cabinets are being held. Staff examined the area. As I mentioned before, the site is screened by a 6-foot-tall solid fence, and with arborvitae plantings around there. In the 15 years since those arborvitae have been planted, they have grown significantly, and staff does not have any concerns with the screening of the fenced-in area. Staff is in support. We understand that it does have a visual impact, but in staff's opinion, does it have a detrimental impact on the neighborhood? Staff's opinion is that it does not, and there is an increased demand for this type of service that Cellcom does provide, and staff is in support of the increase of this tower height from 45 feet to 80 feet with 2 conditions which are required by code, but we want to kind of highlight that so it's made known that we realize its importance. 2 conditions are the proposed tower site, again, shall have adequate space on the tower to allow for 2 additional cell carriers, and the owner of the permit taking out the tower has to allow 2 other carriers to co-locate on that cell tower. So that is it.
All right, technical questions from the commission. Kathy?
Yep. I seem to remember that state legislation basically bars us from not approving this. Rephrase that, we're almost forced to approve this because state legislation doesn't allow us to make significant modifications to requests like this.
Yeah, it determines what the context of it is, so I'm not, you might be on the right track. I'm not specifically sure what the specific statutory requirement is. We'd have to look into that, but I think you're on the right track. I mean, so, in a lot of these replacement situations, we do pretty much have to approve some of these things. The only thing where I'm off on a little bit is if they're increasing the height quite dramatically here, so that could be the one avenue that we would have some jurisdiction over.
But nevertheless, staff's in favor of it. Okay, thank you.
Gary?
Yes, I guess my basic question is regards to the potential safety of this tower. A couple of questions. First, does staff know how many communication towers that are this size already, or is this the first one that's 80 feet high?
There are several towers. As far as what the current heights are, I don't have that information. The county maintains a county-wide inventory of cell towers within the county, as well as the FCC. That is.
Okay. Is there any potential problem with strong winds blowing this down?
These towers are designed, there's no guy wires on this particular tower. If something were to happen where it collapsed, my understanding it's designed to collapse straight down. It won't be able to tip over.
Okay. That's it.
Other technical questions, let's go with Donna and then Jeff.
I'm sorry to hear that we can't vote it down because I intended to vote it down, primarily because of the health issues. I don't believe that we are I'm certainly not fully aware of the health issues involved here, and I'm sure that there's lots of controversy on both sides, saying some that there's no health issues and others that would say there are health issues. I do know that radio waves, which is what this seems to be, in the past have caused health issues. And and it's going from 45 to 80 feet. I think the question was very well put. How many other towers in the area? That would be relevant to know. But in saying that, I'm opposed to it, and as I understand from what Kathleen has just said, that's not going to make any difference, but that's my feeling.
Jeff?
Well, first, I think Kathy brings up a good point, and I'd like to know what the answer is, before we start to vote on something. If Kathy's correct and we can't turn it down, that's one thing, but this isn't a replacement, this is an add-on. So I'm not sure what the law states, and regardless of what we do here, at least the Common Council should know that when they go to vote, regardless of what we do here. The second issue is what Donna was getting at. Jeff, do you know if there's any scientific proof that these kinds of additional concentrations would cause any health issues at all? Versus having, and maybe, the representative can answer that.
Yeah, the petitioner's here.
Because, you could have a tower that's 45 feet and another tower over here, and you might be fine, but if you have more concentration, I don't know that answer. And then the last thing is 15, 16 years ago, this got turned down to go to a 75-foot tower, and I kind of want to know what's changed. Why is staff now saying it's okay to go to 80 feet, where 15 years ago we said for the same reason, an aesthetic reason, we don't want to, and largely that area hasn't changed a lot in terms of its makeup.
Well, the existing tower's been there for 15 years, as you mentioned. The petitioner provided those renderings. We looked at them. Is it a visual difference? Yes, of course. But we don't think that it's a big enough impact where it's going to negatively hamper the aesthetics of the area. Back in, I believe, 2000, one of the biggest critics of the 80-foot tower, I believe, was it Fair Acres? Fair Acres. And I believe that's when they were being constructed. And
Yeah, I just look at it from a standpoint of, if you got a 45-foot tower and you got 35-foot trees, you don't have much exposure. You go up to, I don't know of too many 85-foot trees that are, or 80-foot trees that are around here. Maybe where I was born they are, but not around here. So, I mean, largely, trees can mask some of that, and I get that. But in this one, you may not, and I was just wondering what staff's reasoning was why we would contradict something that we did 15 years ago.
Sounds like David might have an answer.
Yeah,
Other than the fact that 15 years, I mean, technology's changed a lot, and we have more of a demand, and that, not lost on that.
Well, when staff looked at it, there were multiple facets that we looked at. I think the first thing is when we reviewed the minutes, there was a lot more opposition in 2000. It wasn't a new technology in 2000, but it was a much newer technology. From our opinion, people have become much more comfortable with cell phones, electronic data, that kind of thing, and a lot of the fears, whether that was health risk fears or aesthetic fears, have kind of, we shouldn't say went away, but have lessened. And that is kind of reflected in the responses that the petitioner had received. Also, we have received no calls from any of the neighbors in strong opposition. We did receive the one full opposition, but also that it has been there for 15 years. The tower has been, keep in mind the intensity of signal that's going to be coming out of the 45-foot tower that's there today as compared to the 80 is the same number of antennas. It'll have more capacity, it'll be up higher, but the petitioner can kind of talk about that. But I think just the fact that it's been 15 years, we haven't received any complaints that I'm aware of, and we did only receive one response that was in opposition, kind of helped us to not oppose the expansion.
And one last question is, it states in there in the analysis, says the increased tower height along with the upgraded equipment will expand the coverage and absorb capacity from surrounding sites. Does that mean that those sites are going to be eliminated? Or does it just means that they're over capacity now, and it'll absorb that capacity from them.
The petitioner could probably answer that better, but they're probably, almost all cell sites right now are over capacity. And especially with the new types of data, the 4G versus the 3G versus the regular roaming data plans, or, I'm no cell guy. But, that it would absorb some of that capacity that may be over right now or may be growing, especially in that area to the south. You have higher concentrations of housing, and you have the university and so on. But the petitioner would probably be better to answer that for you.
Can I just jump in here on just some anecdotal stuff I picked up from the internet off my cell phone?
Thankfully, there's a tower over here.
It's from a Journal Online column that was talking about a dispute over the height of a cell tower being erected down in the Milwaukee area. With the new regulations signed into law as part of the state budget, local governments can no longer deny wireless tower permits solely for aesthetic reasons, limit the height of towers to under 200 feet, or require that antennas and structures such as water towers be placed on public property. So what we can do is that's some of the guidance that I'm getting from that article. We can do a little bit more. I know there's guidance out there because I know it came out as part of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. They did some analysis on it. We can dig that up.
So the council will have that. Other technical questions before we open this one up? Okay, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Mr. Wyman, want to share your thoughts?
I'm Jim Wyman. I'm here on behalf of Cellcom, and Sitel Wireless. I guess I can expand on some of the questions that were already asked, and then if new questions come up, I can answer those as well. I think one of the two questions were, why the additional height and the health concerns. Yes, regarding health concerns, the federal government, via the 1996 Telecommunications Act, prohibits municipalities from denying applications for cell sites based on health concerns. I guess the consensus among professionals, scientists, medical profession in the United States, Europe, across, essentially in the world, is that these don't present any health risks. And this, I think, your question regarding the density of cell sites or antennas in a given area, does that increase the amount of exposure or the health concerns? That's a good point. In a very limited extent, or to a very limited extent, it does. That would be on like a rooftop installation. If you have a lot of antennas in a concentrated area, there are certain what's called MPE, maximum permitted exposure limits, that the FCC sets. But I guess to reduce it down, what it really means is that the only health concern that exists is if there's going to be somebody working on a rooftop in very close proximity to a set of antennas for many hours on end. And that when I say very close, I'm talking literally 1 to 2 or 3 feet in front of a set of antennas for 6 to 8 hours at a time or longer. So if you're just a short distance away from the antennas, especially if you're behind the antennas, there are no health concerns or no exposure risks. If you wanted to investigate that further, I would encourage anybody to Google this online and you look at the difference between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. There are many different studies that are out there. But the bottom line is that municipalities can't deny them for health concern reasons. And going to the point of whether or not the plan commissioner of the city could technically deny this, while the state law enacted with the budget last year does greatly limit a municipal authority to deny telecommunications sites or tower sites, there are limited exceptions where a municipality could deny certain things, and one of those avenues is via the setback. So technically, in this case, I believe that the height that we're proposing in comparison to the distance that we are set back from the property line would allow the city to deny the extension in this case, because I think we would be technically exceeding it. And I'd have to, I apologize, I don't know the distance from the pole to the property line, but I believe it's in that 25 to 30 foot range. So technically, we'd need 40 feet based on the state law to get around the ability for the city to deny it on those grounds. Regarding the utility, I think in the last, especially the last 3 to 5 years, the amount of capacity that's being used on, or utilized on the telecommunications networks has exploded. You've got Instagram, Snapchat, people are continuously checking email, looking at news, looking at sports, streaming videos. All of that is an incredible demand on the network, and the only way that you can handle the increased demand is by having additional antennas in an area, or expanding, doing things with your existing cell sites to, in this case, when we talk about offloading traffic from other sites, Cellcom has other antenna sites in the surrounding area. This site right now, because it's so low, is only sending signal to a very limited area. And this site itself is not suffering from capacity issues. What they want to do is raise the height of it so that it covers a larger area. And when this site covers a larger area, it means that the other sites no longer have to serve that area, so it gives them more capacity to handle traffic near them. So it would not mean less sites, it would just mean a more efficient use of the existing sites. And the alternate, though, to not being able to extend this would be, if we can't extend it, we've got to do something else to add capacity, and that would mean adding antennas in one or two, possibly two other locations on a rooftop, or possibly proposing, another tower someplace.
Any questions? Yes, Ed?
Does this tower currently have co-located antennas with other companies?
No, it's capable, but again, due to the height, the Cellcom's antennas are at 45 feet. The next closest tenant would be, 35 to 38 feet, and it really doesn't offer much utility at that point. So it will be designed, or the base is already designed to handle 3 tenants at 80 feet.
Right.
Once it's up higher, I think it's going to lend itself to more utility for other carriers, and I think there's a greater chance that, there might be 1 or 2 tenants that locate on it down the road.
Okay. John, Gary, and then Don.
Not looking for an exact figure or whatever, but what would the ballpark be for the difference from what your coverage would be now to what you're proposing to extend to?
It depends on the area. I mean, you could be talking a block or two. You could be talking 4 to 8 blocks. You could be talking even more than that. Depends on what might be blocking the signal. In certain, at 80 feet, at 80 feet, we're talking about real height. I mean, it could go a quarter mile of real value-added service in any particular direction, but I would need information from Cellcom's engineers to get a really good feel for that.
So going at your maximum, it would be about a half-mile diameter?
It could possibly go up to that, where it's really helping to offload, yeah.
Okay.
Gary, and then Don.
Yeah, I have a question for the staff, actually. How does the city know that there are two additional users using the tower? Is the city notified? I guess,
They are required to get building permits for the installation of additional antennas.
And what's the penalty if they don't? It's a penalty vis-a-vis the zoning code, I would assume, because it's...
Wouldn't be zoning, because the zoning's allowed, it would probably be a penalty from the Building Inspections Division for constructing work without a permit.
Okay, thank you.
Donna?
Yes, thank you for the Google thing about ionizing and non-ionizing. However, can you elaborate on those, please?
Sure. I guess in short, the ionizing would be the type of radiation that you would, same exposure if you're getting an X-ray or from a microwave. Non-ionizing is going to be radio wave signals from cellular, AM, FM radio stations. And the problem, I guess what research has shown is that the concern with ionizing radiation is that's the kind of radiation that can alter the human cells and cause mutations, or that could lead to cancer. The ionizing or non-ionizing signals don't have the same effect and don't have the same dangers associated with them.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner as long as he's here? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Yes, sir. Name and address, please.
Yes, John Jansen, own the adjacent property at 1845 and 1847 Wisconsin Street. It's just kitty corner from where the tower is currently located. I was one of the individuals that was opposed to the additional height of the tower. And I guess my concern is, for myself as well as the other surrounding property owners, how do we benefit from this? The proposed antenna increase in height is clearly going to affect property values. Cell towers, as they go up in height, become more of an eyesore. And if you ask any realtor, and I've talked to a few, when individuals are looking at purchasing a property, if there's a cell tower located nearby, especially if it's adjacent to the property, it is a big concern. Because they are unsightly, there are concerns about the potential health risks. And I think if you do some more research online, you will see that there are health risks that have been identified. There are some research studies that have been conducted in other countries, Germany and specifically, where they have had some concern from the radiation that these towers emit. And then, again, it's just the property value. Realtors say that when a tower is installed in a surrounding area, that the property value immediately decreases by 10%, and that based on the proximity of the tower to the property that is for sale or may be for sale, and as that tower height increases, the property values continue to decrease on a much greater percentage. My question is, does the application that was submitted have adequate evidence that a gap in cell coverage exists in the area? Has the company demonstrated a real need for increased coverage in the area? What specific evidence is there that there's a gap with this cell coverage in the area? And does the application refer to any future technology that the tower may be used for if it is increased in height? Obviously, going back to the safety concerns, I realize that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 prohibits a planning commission from denying a permit based solely on health reasons. However, as was stated here just a little earlier, there is a concern with regard to a setback provision. As the tower exists currently, it is beyond that setback provision, and once it goes up to 80 feet, it'll be well beyond the setback provision. So my interpretation from the research I've done is that the commission does have the ability to block the approval of the tower solely based on the setback. So I'm not sure what information Kathleen had, but I'm not sure that the setback provision was looked at closely enough, because that is an issue. The tower was denied an 80-foot height back 15 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever it was, in year 2000, primarily due to aesthetic reasons. And I think any of the individuals that are on the commission, if you were in a position where a cell company was looking to put a tower alongside your property, whether it be in the front, along the side, or in the back, I'm quite certain you would have the same concerns that I do. So I appreciate any support that I can get in regards to the information that I've just discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission.
Move for approval of conditions.
That's not your turn.
Jeff was first, and then David.
Just a question for Darren on the setback issue. Do you know back when this was first approved, whether there was a setback issue there and whether we granted a exemption for that?
I'm not sure about the setback one is a new, it's not, height, cell towers are exempt from our height regulations, but the setbacks, I'm not, Jeff, you did the research on this, what? What was the finding on that?
There was no exception given back in 2001 for any setback variance because the current height of 45 feet met the setback requirements.
David, you're next.
Yeah. I move for approval with conditions.
Second.
All right, discussion on the motion, been moved and seconded to approve conditions, discussion on this motion. Donna, and then Ken.
Well, I'm very sorry to be personal here, but I'm going to be, because I need to be. Now, you see me sitting here with a cold. I don't have a cold. I have an allergy. I got a new Christmas tree. My new Christmas tree gave me the allergy I have. I worked 18 years in the county jail where there were lots of antennas, as we all know. My immune system has been compromised. Now you can do what you want with that. You can dispute it and you can take it to all kinds of people. I would vote against this, and I would vote against it for health issues, and that's not allowed. But I'll vote against it then because of the setback. And you can't tell me that there's things that go on in our health issues that people can say they don't exist, it's in your mind. I didn't have a voice this week, and I believe that our Debbie can attest to that. Yes, I had no voice. And that was because I bought an artificial Christmas tree that is, you can go, I got it at Menards. It's a beautiful tree. And I will keep that tree for a long time. And I knew before I put it up that I was going to react to it. I vote no.
Kathy.
Well, I'm sorry that staff didn't do their usual excellent job on background information on this, but for what it's worth, I think sounds like this 80-foot is very high, but it falls within the parameters of height, if that's true. I didn't even know there was a cell tower there. And I drive by there all the time. So when I got this, oh, whoa, I'll go look. So right now, you can't see it. You know, it vanishes. As Jeff said or somebody said, the tree height is such that you don't even notice it. This, you will notice. But we are, most of us, not me, but most of us are junkies. Cell phone, wireless junkies, which is why they are doing this. We're driving the demand. So with all the factors involved, I don't like it, but I'm going to vote for it.
Other thoughts? Ed?
I know we have a motion on the table, and I would never disrespect your motion, David, but we just don't have a lot of clarity here. I would be a lot more comfortable laying this over. I don't know if anybody else would be on board with that, but...
For what reason?
I mean, I don't know what we're allowed to approve, not approve. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of confusion here. I don't know if we're within a setback or not within a setback. I don't know if we're... I don't know what I'm hearing, frankly. I'm hearing a lot of muddled information. So, I mean, I'd be a lot more comfortable voting with information, frankly. So, I mean, that's, again,
Ed, let me chime in on that. We could do that research when we come back in January. We could have all that research done. We could have checked with the league. We could check with our attorneys to see exactly what flexibility you have. I know you don't have much flexibility. You have almost zero flexibility in that regard. So
that's what
just
I recall as well,
so just be prepared when it comes back.
Yeah.
You have almost no flexibility in that regard, but if it helps you bring some clarity and some peace of mind to your decision-making process, yeah, we can get that information unless there's an objection.
I would rather know what we're looking at.
From the applicant for early January.
If the board's more comfortable waiting, we can wait.
David?
Yeah, I was going to say that if that's the pleasure of the PC, that I would be happy to withdraw my motion and accept Ed's...
I guess then I'll...
I would second that.
I'll make amend it,
just amend your...
to lay it over.
Amend your, you could amend your motion to...
Why not just get rid of it and then just have one instead of two?
Then let's have another motion.
Then I'll make a motion to lay this over and...
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Cummings?
Aye.
Prop?
Aye.
Gray?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Boyce?
Aye.
Owen?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Hintz?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried 9-0.
Let's move on to item number 2, conditional use permit and plan development and architectural review for a public utility structure at Snell West Sanitary Pump Station located at 1975 West Snell Road.
Thank you. The Department of Public Works, along with AECom, is seeking approval for construction of a new sanitary lift station to replace the existing Fulton Avenue pump station. Here is a zoning map of the area, and the subject site is Zone C2, the Plan Development Overlay. Here is an aerial shot of the subject site. It currently houses the Fulton Avenue pump station, which is below grade. To the west, you have there's a commercial drive area, and alongside that, to the west of that, is a residence. To the north is a landscaping business with some commercial warehouses. To the south is a commercial warehouse, and to the east is commercial land, or commercially zoned vacant land. Based on a study from November of 2013, the existing pump station does not have the capacity to pump anticipated design peak flows. So the new pump station would have the capacity for future demand. Here's a site plan. Actually, all right. That's it. All right, here's a site plan of the proposed development. A pump house building would be in the center of the lots with a drive aisle to the east and to the south of it, and I'd mostly use the existing drive area of the pump station. And the drive area will also serve as the parking area for the pump station. Not doing anything. Okay, here's the landscaping plan. The only problem that we had with it was that the residence to the west was open to the property, so it was, the pump house is very visible from the residence, so staff suggests that we increase the landscaping by either relocating or adding more trees or vegetation along the west lot line. Okay, here's a view of the proposed elevations. The proposed building will be 15 feet, 4 inches tall, with a split-face concrete masonry exterior. The facade will be broken up with mechanical louvers and panel windows. There'll be mechanical equipment placed on the roof as well as on the ground to the east side of the building. The rooftop units will not be screened, but as you can see here, well, probably can't see here, but it shows that the rooftop equipment will not be visible from eye level at the street. However, the ground mechanical equipment will be visible from the north, east, and south of the building, and staff recommends that the ground equipment be screened by landscaping or fencing. Planning staff recommends approval of the CUP and plan development for a public utility structure with the following conditions. Additional trees or other vegetation is added or relocated to provide screening along the west lot line, and the ground mechanical equipment be screened by landscaping or fencing. And planning staff recommends architectural approval of the proposed building.
All right, thank you. Technical questions? Steve?
Thank you. Is this building going to be identical to the one that was built across from Webster Stanley?
It'd be very similar.
Very similar. We have talked about, raising the bar architecturally for what is built in the city, and I think that includes our own buildings. That's why we spent the money for the central garage. I don't know what it would take to do something with this block architecture. I know landscaping will soften it a bit, but I think we've got to look at doing something. And if we can't afford it, I think we have to invest enough in the landscaping, both here and then back at the facility across from Webster Stanley. We get a lot of complaints about that building. It's an eyesore, and it's brand new. And I think there are heads going up and down in agreements.
Other technical questions?
Jeff?
When you talk about peak flows, what are you talking about? You talking about like a 100-year flood type issue?
No, this is actually a sanitary sewer, not storm sewer. Part of the peak flow is wet weather flow. That does get accounted for in the sanitary sewer system, a certain amount of inflow and infiltration. What we're looking at here is actually a secondary project to this will be extending a sanitary sewer pipe from this location east underneath the highway. It will pick up the existing Snell Road lift station and bring that west to free up capacity in the sanitary sewer system that runs down Jackson so that development can occur in the Eichstadt Road area where we are currently over capacity for the sewer pipes. So we're looking at some rerouting and then design capacities of the larger service area once with a 30-year build out.
And the cement pad that is there for equipment, what types of equipment are you talking about?
On the exterior?
Yeah.
Why
can that not be incorporated in the building?
Those are electrical transformers and items that can't be inside.
Okay, which you plan to have screened?
We can certainly screen them, yes. That will not be a problem.
Gary?
Yes. It says that there's going to be increased capacity. What is the reason for increased capacity?
Again, we are rerouting portions of the sanitary sewer system that currently flows east to the west. So we're having more flow come this direction, and the current lift station does not have the capacity to meet the 30-year expected build-out in the area.
Oh, okay. So the city expects additional development in that general area?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other technical questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Bringing up the point that was brought up earlier on the architectural design, does the staff feel that, we usually look at these buildings and you say you want, other features so they're not plain or not this, that, and the other. Did the staff look at that from architectural design features, to put the city under the same standards that we kind of put everybody else? Get to the point where we're not treating ourselves differently?
Right, yeah, we did look at that, and actually, we had some changes to the building from originally proposed. Some of the louvers and some of the opaque tinted window areas were added onto the facades. Also, landscaping was put into the front. Now, once again, this isn't the building design itself. Landscaping was put on the front to kind of soften the building from the street. There's also a lot of horizontal banding on the building using color variation to try to break up the mass. It's not a large building, but the mass of the building anyway. When we broke down to it in our review, it is a public utility building, or it doesn't matter if it's public, it's a utility building itself. And so we did want to break up the mass, but we didn't hold it to a standard of, let's say, an office building or a residential building. We held it more towards an accessory building to that type of use. So though we did require some additional break in the wall planes and some color variation and we're recommending some movement in the landscaping, yeah, we did not go to that great extent with the building design.
Yeah, but we just looked at one not too long ago where I think it was the Sam's Club, where we required their refuge area to be of the same materials that the building is in.
Correct.
So I don't look at this as any different. We're requiring a refuge area to be the same building site, yet this is a utility building, so we say, okay, we don't have to break up some of the facade like we require others, although this building isn't huge. I just kind of agree, if you're going to build something and you're building something new in the city, it kind of helps if you're requiring other people to do something similar to kind of follow that.
Right, and I would argue the point that, yes, we did improve the look of the building from utility structure. It's much better than a refuse enclosure. The building materials themselves are a decent quality of building material. I mean, it's not a sheet metal building, it is a masonry building. And we did require some of that articulation, breaking up the wall mass, and also the color variation. But I guess to reiterate, we did not go to the extent of this would be a heavily used site, either by the public or by residents or employees of the area. So we did not hold it to that standard. But we did hold it to a standard.
Other technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Going once, going twice. Okay, nobody's here to speak to it, so back to the commission for discussion and a vote. Kathy?
This looks identical to the concrete monstrosity that is in Menominee Park. I strongly think it is. Maybe it's got a jog or two on one side. The only thing I think, I'm all for functioning sewers, so we're going to have to do this. I mean, I know we need this pump station, and this is at least not in a well-trafficked, it's not in a residential area, it's in an industrial, commercial area. We've got to have landscaping. We cannot have spindly little shrubs like are around the Menominee Park thing, which is an embarrassment. I hope it embarrasses the Public Works Department and they come back, and/or the City Council, and they provide funding for some decent shrubbery. It doesn't have to be deep-rooted, that can work with whatever piping is underground there, but it's got to be better than this. I think I counted 4 sad shrubs when I drove by today, and that is not good. So what can we do to beef up the landscaping condition on this?
Jeff, you next.
And just to follow up with Kathy, I mean, we could vary the color, and having gray and then dark gray, to me, doesn't vary the color. At least, put some other types of colors that are contrasting colors so it doesn't appear that way. That's not going to be that, costly or, I'm not talking about changing the world here. I'm just talking about something a little bit different than
Well, there are two.
tan and a light tan. I mean, come on.
There are 2 actions that you're doing here. One is the conditional use permit and the plan development review, which is basically the use and the site layout. But you're also doing an architectural review, and you can put conditions on either of those. So obviously, if you wanted increased landscaping, you put that under the conditional use permit. The architectural approval for the building, you could request some articulation if you have that thought in your mind now, or you could ask staff to bring it back and work on it and bring you back another product.
Other discussion? John?
Just kind of want to piggyback on the piggyback. And I agree with what Steve said, with what Kathy said, with what Jeff said, and I understand it's a pump station, but it looks like a big brick. And if it's a big brick that just has lighter and darker shades of the same color, it's just still a big brick. And that's one of the things that people complain about at Menominee Park, is because you're out there, you're enjoying a softball game, you're fishing, you're whatnot, and then here's this big piece of brick. And I think that's kind of the point that everybody's getting to, is we just want something different. I mean, we're not asking you to reinvent the wheel here, just get some trees, bigger trees, and have some different colors, not just like one shade of brown and a different shade of brown and maybe a shade of red that's reddish brown. Just kind of try something different. That'd probably please a lot of us.
sounds like we can add some conditions, maybe we can get kind of specific with those.
Yeah.
Other discussion on this? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
If I could just add a couple comments to the color. The color is the same as the Melvin. That was done selectively so that we can maintain paint in stock. The smooth face graffiti block is, or the smooth face block is put at the height that's prime for graffiti so that it can be painted much easier than the split face block can. So some of those items were considered in design, same with the Melvin, trying to make it so that we can maintain it from that standpoint with paint and keep it looking decent. Beefing up the landscaping can certainly be done. The landscaping hasn't grown as much as we had hoped out at the Melvin pump station. It hasn't really taken off yet. I don't know if that's because of the amount of disturbance that was around that pump station due to the depth, and it's due to the concrete volume that's there is just limiting it. I'm not sure what the reason that landscaping hasn't taken off so well.
Gary?
Yeah, just one quick comment. I guess I generally agree with 3 or 4 other people. I think, however, that if the building is somewhat multicolor, it's more important than having landscape, by the fact that landscaping basically takes some maintenance, which means more cost. And changing the color of the building a little bit, having it multicolored, is a one-time expense. And I would be more in favor of that if I had to choose between landscaping and multicolored building.
Thank you. Are we ready to have a motion of some sort? Brad? Jeez. I know David wants to make a motion. Kathy?
Well, I'll move approval with condition 1, additional trees or other vegetation, major increase in vegetation, and I can't define that, and I shouldn't define it. Something tall. Even if it's out, it has to be out from the building, and this is not all part of the motion, I'm explaining it. If it has to be out from the building a little bit because of piping and whatever's underground, at least it's going to be screening it a little bit. It doesn't have to be right up against the foundation, from my perspective.
Breaking up the lines.
Breaking up the lines, yes. The idea is to break up the lines on all sides of that building that are not, well, the one side is shielded by the warehouse, so not that side, but the other 3 sides ought to have, I'm going to say, for lack of a better word, major additional trees and vegetation, and somebody else can wordsmith that.
So your motion is to approve this with additional condition or addition to the condition on 1, which was part condition, part instruction. But I think we got what it means, and I think they got what it means. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Steve seconds the motion. Any discussion on that motion in terms of, go ahead, Jeff.
So are we talking about approving the brick with some landscaping?
Well, I think
Basically, that's what my
Kathy
motion said.
was motioning for item A. Item B would be the architectural review.
I thought you motioned to approve
The whole thing.
the whole thing.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, okay, that's,
Yeah.
in essence, what I meant, approve the whole thing.
Yeah, she meant to approve the whole thing with just a change to, so we're gonna have the brick with some additional landscaping.
Correct.
Intense.
Intense, tall.
Yeah, intense landscaping.
After hearing the explanation of why the buildings are as they are, with graffiti and that type thing that you're talking about, I'm not too upset with that. I do agree with Kathleen that the shrubbery and the trees and the aesthetics would help a great deal. And watering usually will help with the planting.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion that's been seconded. Let's call the roll.
Cummings?
Pink eyes come in different colors, doesn't it?
Crop? Aye. Gray?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Warsack?
Aye.
Vaughn?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Hintz?
Aye.
Wojtek?
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right, moving on to item number 4, conditional use permit development plan review for a commercial restaurant with drive-through east of 1090 North Washburn Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are welcome.
Okay, as you had mentioned, this is a conditional use permit and a planned development review for a restaurant with drive-through on Washburn. We take those as two actions, but to kind of try to explain it a little bit better, the conditional use permit is required for a restaurant with a drive-through. There you go. And the development plan approval is obviously for the development plan, for the site layout and site plan. So on the screen right now,
You're on.
well, I'm on the wrong item. Just a second.
We laid that one over.
Yes.
I hope
This is located on Washburn Street as I get to it. Here we go. This is located on Washburn Street. It's currently a vacant about 1.7 acre piece of property that is directly east of the existing Quick Trip site, which is at the corner of Westtown and North Washburn. And as you can see here on the screen, it's hatched out area. Generally, the entire area is Zone C2 planned development with a Highway 41 overlay. Have a little bit of M1 zoning that's all highway property right now. The site itself is bordered on the north by State Trunk Highway 21, on the east by Highway 41. As I had said, the Quick Trip gas station site and also the Westtown North Washburn 21 intersection further to the west. And then you have the Lowe's development site to the south. And maybe if I can get the aerials a little bit better, although it is dated, so it doesn't show the Quick Trip site. But you can see the layout of the new roadway system there. So again, north of the site is basically DOT land, and east of the site is DOT. And then as I described before, so nearby uses in the general area itself include a lot of general retail uses and service uses. There's a variety of restaurants up and down Westtown. There's service businesses on Westtown. You have, as I had mentioned, a very large big box Lowe's development. Some smaller strip centers, including things like Cellcom Wireless, since we've heard about that earlier today. Tell you the phones that they need the tower for. But you have Holiday Inn Express and just a variety of general commercial uses. The recommended use of restaurant with drive-through is permitted in the underlying C2 zoning district. Also, it would meet the comprehensive plan's commercial recommendation for the area. As I had mentioned, this use itself would employ 12 to 15 employees on any given shift. It would be open Monday through Saturday from early in the morning, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., so very typical for commercial developments. The placement of the project, and I'm kind of zoom in, this is a site plan, and we have two here. The one up on the right-hand corner, and I apologize for these graphics, they're a little bit difficult on these small monitors, but the graphic up in the right-hand corner shows both this and the Quick Trip site, how they interact together, because they are kind of being developed as, I don't want to say a campus, but as a uniform development, even though they are separate properties and separate uses. And the plan to the left is the actual petitioner's plan for the restaurant. This is going to be a little bit clearer. This is the landscape plan, but it kind of zooms in a little bit, and it's a little bit clearer. So the placement of the proposed building, it's placed primarily to facilitate traffic on the site. So you'll see it's pushed far to the west. We went through many different scenarios on placement of the building. Because of the truck traffic and the traffic related between the Quick Trip site, this site, the two entrances on site, is why you see the placement as it sits right now. The building itself is a one-story building. It's about 4,500 square feet, a little less than that. There's a patio situated on the north side of the building, an outdoor dining patio. The drive-through is situated on the west side of the building, in between the Quick Trip site and the remainder of this lot. There's a refuse enclosure, and I wish I could use the pointer and you could see it, but refuse enclosure on the northwest corner of the site. And then obviously, as I had mentioned, the drive-through window is on the south side. Even though the drive-through lane wraps around the west and the south side of the building, you have a lot of parking and a very large landscape island on the east side of the site, covering the east side of the site. There is an existing, you can see a three-way driveway on the site plan that leads in. It's directly across from the Lowe's development driveway on the south side of Washburn. That's again a one-way in, a two-way out driveway. That's existing currently, and it serves both this site and the Quick Trip site, and there's an internal drive aisle that runs east-west parallel to Washburn. It's almost a frontage road on a frontage road, although it's a private drive. The building itself only takes up about 6%, a little more than 6% of the site. Impervious surface takes up about 59%, and the remaining 35% is green space. The placement of the proposed improvements do require some base standard modifications. Specifically, the west lot line, where it shares with Quick Trip site, they'd be requiring a 0-foot setback for some of the facilities. The east setback, which fronts the Highway 41 detention area, that they're requiring a reduced setback to 20 feet from 25. And then the north setback, which is the setback on State Trunk Highway 21, would be reduced to 10 feet for that northern drive aisle, which you can see on the site plan, would be reduced down to 10 feet. And I'm going to go back to the, if I can, to the aerial photo. Jeff, can you figure out how this works? Want to go back one?
You might have it on mouse.
All right, let me try this now. There we go. Thank you, Joe. So you'll see on the site, to the north of the site on State Trunk Highway, it is green space. It's detention facilities for the DOT, for the city, and detention facilities on the east side. Those two areas are going to remain green space in perpetuity unless the intersection's redeveloped in, a long time from now. So we do support those base standard modifications of those setbacks. On the west lot line, it does share that lot line with Quick Trip. Quick Trip is built up pretty close to that property line as well, and as they are functioning as sort of a group development, we don't have a problem with that reduced setback for most of the facilities on the west. Also, in the site design, it requires a base standard modification for the refuse enclosure and the drive-through. Both of those are located in what's called front yards, which neither of them are allowed to be in the front yard. Staff is in support of the base standard modifications for those. Again, the drive-through on the south side of the building, fronting Washburn, and the refuse enclosure on the north side of the building, fronting State Trunk Highway 21. This site is very challenging. It's for one, a relatively small site, but it has 3 frontages on each of the highway and the Washburn. So it's very limited places where you could fit these type of facilities. So we are supporting the base standard modifications for both of those front yard setbacks. Parking for the site, 61 stalls is being provided. Falls within our minimum and maximum range of the zoning code, which would go up to about 69 stalls, so they're a little bit below that maximum. The drive-through circulation, and I'm going to go one forward to this one again. Drive-through circulation, you can see coming into the entrance, you have a lot of parking to the east side, but the circulation is going to go around for the drive-through around that building, around the north side to the west, and then channel down to the west side of the building through to the drive-through, and then back out onto that access aisle. So that is kept relatively separated from the primary traffic aisles, as well as the main parking area. Access to the site, I had mentioned there's a southern drive aisle that's going to lead to the Quick Trip site internally, and a northern drive aisle that would lead to the west as well, allowing people to go back and forth from the two sites without entering or exiting back onto Washburn. There is a 3-lane driveway, as I had mentioned before, that leads directly to this location. There's also a 3-lane driveway at the intersection of Westtown and North Washburn that is there for the Quick Trip site. So both of those sites' access ways would be available to the customers of Panera as well as the customers of Quick Trip. That is going to require a cross-access easement from this site to be provided to the Quick Trip site. You see those often. Pedestrian access is shown directly from the building side, which leads up to the patio and the front door, directly down to North Washburn. They are going to be signing and striping that walkway, stop, look for pedestrians, and also striping it on the pavement to differentiate that from the drive aisle itself and to make that a little bit safer. The site itself for signage would be allowed per code, a 60-foot tall sign, and on this size site, about 800 square feet of area for signage. That's all sides, so about 400 square feet for both sides. Would also allow 30% of the wall area for signage as well. I'm going to go to the next one. This is the elevations of the building. You can see the signage. Some signage is located on the building walls. It's far below the 30%, which would be permitted in this district. It's conservative in staff's opinion. And I'm going to go to the ground signs. They have provided basically two options for ground signs in their application. Now, I'm not sure if they're deciding between the two or if they want to just bring it up for discussion. Both signs are 60 feet tall. Two different sizes. One is about 270 square feet per side, and the other would be 387 per side. So one is almost maxing out to the 800 square foot allowed. The other one is well below. To kind of give you a concept of how tall those signs are, the graphic on the bottom left is showing these signs in relation to a Bergstrom sign that is quite a bit down North Washburn Street. It's not directly in this area. We did an analysis at request for signs in the area and the heights of signs in the area. The Lowe's development has a 60-foot high sign, also a 30-foot high sign. There's other signs in the area that are about 40 feet high, but the majority are around 30 or under. Part of that is because the Highway 41 corridor allows 60, the other areas do not. They allow up to 30. So you see some of that, but even in the corridor itself, we're not seeing a lot of very tall signs. In this case, the petitioner probably answered it better, but I believe they're attempting to capture some of that traffic from the adjoining roadways, which are elevated. Landscaping, we'll go back to the landscape plan. There's quite a few shrubs and tree planting situated on all sides of the building. Most substantial amounts are located in the north, basically around that patio area, as you can see. But they're also basically circulated around the site. They have quite a bit of landscaping. Staff, in reviewing it, did recommend, or is recommending, that additional landscaping be located in the north property. You can see on the landscape plan there's sort of a gap. A part of that may be because of drainage swales in there, but we are recommending that additional vegetation be located in that north property line where you see the gap, to kind of help soften that parking lot again. But there's a very large internal landscape island in the center. It sort of happened, the circulation and the design of the site facilitated this large green space in the middle of the site. And you can see on the four sides it has the landscape islands. Islands are situated per code and at all the row ends and at the centers of the, well, they don't have any really long parking rows, but at the row ends. One of the things that did come out through the landscape plan is a substitution of trees for shrubs. Often we will allow the substitution trees. If you provide more shrubs, you can reduce the number of trees. If you provide more trees, reduce the number of shrubs, so on and so forth with the landscaping requirements. They had done this in the proposal and actually reduced quite a bit of the landscaping, or put the tree landscaping down to shrubs. And when we looked at that, and you can see it on the corner of your landscape plan, the numbers are broken down there. We thought that was kind of too much of an imbalance, and we are going to be recommending that additional trees be put back in instead of just full reduction. But what it basically breaks down to, we are recommending that the landscape plan be approved by the Department of Community Development at permit issuance. Stormwater management, there is an inlet located on the northwest corner of the site, and that's going to take some of the stormwater into the detention facility that was built during the Quick Trip development. There is current stormwater facilities and that north property line on the Quick Trip site, and also, I believe, in some of the right-of-way that would be facilitating all of the stormwater for this site. So they wouldn't be necessary for them to create their own stormwater facilities. That was accommodated for in the previous development. For the building itself, I had said before, it's a one-story building. It's about 24 feet tall. It's flat roof. Materials are very interesting. They're using a reclaimed Cream City brick, stucco, and wood tiles. So they're doing quite a variety. And this plan doesn't do it justice if if you've been to a Panera, you've kind of seen that the buildings are pretty nice. So the materials and the colors are kind of leading to not creating any big blank walls. On the south side of the building where the drive-through is situated, we did recommend some improvements, some trellises. You'll see them in gray on there. Trellises have been added to that south facade to break it up a little bit more and to provide some green right up on the building, which will be nice when it matures. The bottom elevation is the west elevation. This is the one fronting the back of the Quick Trip building. We didn't feel there needed to be a lot of articulation on that building. It's not going to be very visible at all, except if you're going through the drive-through. So we did not push the issue with getting more articulation on that side, as it's not quite seen. The site itself, as Jeff had mentioned earlier with a different discussion, we didn't get a detail on the refuse enclosure. So we are suggesting and recommending that the refuse enclosure design match or at least complement the Pittsburgh building in materials. And with that, we are recommending approval of the conditional use and the plan development with 7 conditions. Base standard modification for the north front yard setback, the east front yard setback, and the west front yard setback are proposed. A base standard modification to allow both the refuse enclosure and the drive-through to be in the front yards. Base standard modification to allow some light levels to be in excess of code at the west property line where they're sharing that lot line. That the subject site provide cross-access to the adjacent property to the west. That additional trees be added to the landscape islands and in the open area of the north yard setback as approved by the Department of Community Development, and that the refuse enclosure materials match or complement the primary building with approval by the Community Development Department.
Excellent, thank you. Technical questions? John?
You said that that 3-lane drive was directly across from the Lowe's exit.
Correct.
Did we have any kind of a traffic study or an estimate done to determine how busy that would be? Because that's still in relatively, it's a busy intersection, all through that area.
We don't have a traffic study per se, but in the review from staff, this actually came through when the original site was developed. It was requested that driveway, one at the intersection, and this be the only other driveway on that site, and be directly across from Lowe's. Lowe's is only a partially developed area, as far as a commercial campus area. And so to have those directly across creates a lot better turn movements and reduces conflict. So it was intentional to put it there. And the petitioner is kind of limited by what they can do. They have to use that entrance at that location.
For what it's worth, a lot of people don't even know that Lowe's entrance is there. So very few people actually use it.
But just to piggyback on my thought there while I have the opportunity, I think it's a fantastic design with the drive-through. I really do. Being someone who's worked in the fast service restaurant industry, it helps diffuse that parking lot immensely. So,
great, thank you. Other technical questions, Gary?
Well, I got a couple comments, not perhaps questions. The first comment is, I personally do not think trade between additional trees and less shrubbery is the best advantage in all cases. I think landscaping can be done very well with shrubs and not trees. I also think that landscaping can be done without any trees and without any shrubs. There are many options to do landscaping. The second comment I want to make is I find it's very interesting that this restaurant has a seating capacity of 30 to 35 seats and a parking capacity of 46 to 49 places. I'm not sure whether the 10 or 15 additional parking spots are going to be used, but that is somewhat beyond the Planning Commission's function.
That capacity is only for the patio, Gary. 30 to 35 people on just the patio.
Okay, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I got a question then, is what's the capacity of the restaurant then?
I'm not sure exactly what the capacity is. The petitioners could probably answer that.
Okay.
Other technical
They're
questions?
giving me signals.
Any other technical questions? All right, seeing none, anybody here from the public to speak to this item today? Perhaps the petitioner would like to answer some questions that would help.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Bennett. I'm with Core States Group. I'm the civil engineer of record and project manager. To address the last question, inside approximately 100 seats inside the cafe itself. With regard to the actual project, we're amenable to what the staff has recommended. Just a couple clarifications, questions. In the staff's comments, it references open from Monday through Saturday. We are open Monday through Sunday.
Okay.
And then with regard to landscaping, we're amenable to changes as worked out with staff, and just ask that we work that out as a part of our building permit review process.
Okay. Any questions for the petitioner, as long as here? Questions, comments? Very impressive plan on a very difficult site.
Thank you. We appreciate the help we've received from staff throughout the project so far.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission.
Move to approve with conditions.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Cummings?
Aye.
Crop?
Aye.
Gray?
Aye.
Lori? Aye. Borsak?
Aye.
Holmes?
Aye.
Owen? Is abstaining. Hintz?
Aye.
Fortek?
Aye.
Motion carried, 801.
Okay, thank you. On to item number 5, development plan review for a bank development with drive-through on property located at the southwest corner of Pearl Avenue and Jackson Street in the Marion Road redevelopment area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, again, it's a development plan review for a bank with drive-through, but there's actually two items. Let me get to the right thing here. There's actually two items you're going to be looking at. One is that development plan that I'm going to go through the staff report for, but a secondary review or a secondary analysis that's included with the staff report, and it's kind of at the end, is also the consistency with the Marion Road, Pearl Avenue redevelopment Phase 2 development guidelines. One thing we've heard coming through many of the Plan Commission, most recent Plan Commission meetings, and I'm sure you all can attest, is what's our plan for this area, what's the vision for this area. I mean, we had the visioning, riverfront visioning just earlier tonight, but back in 2003, there was a full redevelopment plan, and we'll get into that a little bit later, for the Marion Pearl area, redevelopment area. This lies in the Phase 2 section of that. I believe there were 3 phases in there. And with your packets, we did include that, so we're going to kind of go over that again at the end of the staff report, but first I'm going to start with just the regular plan development approval or review. So basically the location for this, it is in that Phase 2 redevelopment area, which is outlined in blue on the map up on the screen. You can see the large purple area there is the whole redevelopment area, and you can see there's an industrial site that has an M2 on it right in the middle that's kind of cut out. But what's outlined in blue is the site we're looking at right now. But this area itself, maybe I can zoom to a little bit closer picture. And this is the site where the proposed bank is going to be going. So here's the redevelopment area. It's basically 6.4 acres. This is the Phase 2 part of the development area, redevelopment area. It's bounded by Pearl Avenue on the north, Marion on the south, Riverway Drive, which, if I go to the aerial, doesn't extend all the way down, but you can see it there on the west, and then Jackson Street on the east. And there's a large terrace there in Jackson. So the site itself right now is being bordered basically on the west by some vacant industrial land. You also have the redevelopment area itself. You also have some empty area that's designated for residential, multifamily residential. The Phase 1 of that project, Morgan Crossing, was developed. Phase 2 is yet to come. You can see it, there's area for it next to Riverway Drive. To the south of the project, there was development, Morton Pharmacy. And to the south of that, you have multiple apartment complexes and some mixed-use areas still on the riverfront. To the north, across Pearl, is a church, some very small commercial land that used to have a gas station. It's vacant right now. Church parking lot. And obviously to the east is Jackson Street, and there's multiple various commercial on the other side of Jackson. There were quite a few planned developments and conditional use permits that went in this whole area in the past, and a big group of them in 2009 came through, and that's where you see this plan from. And I'm going to kind of break them all down to what happened here. So In 2009, there was an approval for a planned development for this redevelopment area, Phase 2, that included the Accucom office building, which was constructed, and you can see that on the corner of Pearl and Riverway. And then, as part of a separate planned development, there was the Morton Pharmacy, or the former Morton Pharmacy, on the south side, adjacent to Marion, and then a mixed-use development that was approved to the north, a mixed-use commercial and residential building. What was built at the site and what's out there now, I'll go back to the aerial photograph, see if I got a closer one. You can see the pharmacy site was developed, the two-story commercial office building was developed, and the parking lot was developed for the mixed retail or mixed commercial residential. That building itself was never developed, however, which actually leaves the site open for redevelopment, which is what we're here for today. So what's being proposed, well, here's some pictures of what has developed out there. This was the Morton Pharmacy, the pharmacy site, and you can see it. It's basically a one-story building with a little bit increased height and a tower element, kind of set back from Jackson and from Marion. This is the elevations from the Accucom building. Probably would have been better to get photographs since it's up there, but that was basically a half two-story, half single-story office building. And then this was the conceptual design for that mixed residential commercial building fronting Pearl and Jackson itself. So originally, when the petitioner came to the city, they brought forward this site plan for a bank at the site, some parking on the north and the east sides, basically 49 stalls altogether, which does meet the range of our parking requirements per code. Building itself would be about 8,000 square feet. Would be a single story. When I get into the architecture, it does have some elements that increase the height in the center a little bit. And then a 3-lane drive-through on the south side of the building. Other amenities on the site itself, refuse enclosure, over on the western part of the site, a substantial amount of pedestrian walks, and actually I'm going to go to this, is a revised site plan that came through after our discussion. The building placement is generally the same, but you'll see there have been some changes to the site. Major walkway leading up to Pearl. We have walkways, and it's hard to see on this plan, but hopefully they're better in your packet. A walkway that goes from the building's entrance directly onto Jackson. A walkway that circulates around the north side of the building from the west side entrance. There's also a large patio or sitting area that's on the Pearl Avenue side, sort of a, which you could kind of call like a parklet, with a walkway and some benches, sitting area, quite a bit of landscaping up there, and then also a wrought iron fence that's separated by 4-foot-tall stone piers that basically runs along the street frontage of Pearl and on the north side of the building on Jackson to kind of provide that street wall through the use of the fence. The building itself, site is 1.8 acres about. The building footprint itself takes up a little bit more than 10% of that site. The drive-through and other paved surface takes up about 60% of the site, and then, of course, green space is at 30. The floor area ratio for the building as an 8,000 square foot building on just about an 80,000 square foot site is 0.01. Building itself has this west-east orientation to it rather than a north-south. The entrances, as I had said, to the building are both on the east and the west side, so the west side entrance would service the people in the parking lot primarily. The east side would service the sidewalk entrance, the walk from the street. And then obviously the drive-through is on the south, and that is servicing vehicular movements and vehicular traffic. The site itself, as designed, meets all of the C3 setback requirements, which the central city setback requirements are pretty minimal. There would need to be base standard modification for all of the shared drives that are in here. There's a shared drive coming off of Pearl, there's a shared drive coming off of Jackson, and there's another shared drive that actually comes off of Marion and connects back into Pearl through the other side of the site. Property lines are running down the centers of these drive aisles or internal roads, whatever you'd like to call them, but the drive aisles. So we would need those 0-foot base standard modifications for those side yard setbacks. As I had just mentioned, those drives are shared, so you do have access to the site from from Pearl, Jackson, full access from Pearl, Jackson, and Marion. Internal circulation for automobiles, you can see, is really primarily on the north and the west side of the site, but the drive-through traffic was going to be utilizing the south side of the building, and south side of the site. I guess point out cross-access agreements with all the other properties are already in place, so those wouldn't be necessary. Staff had some concern with the exit of the drive-through into the Jackson Street drive aisle, primarily because that exit onto the Jackson Street drive aisle is about 9 feet from the property line. Code does require a 75-foot lateral clearance, so we would need to have a base standard modification for that. Most of our concern came from the potential of vehicles exiting the drive-through, taking a left to get onto Jackson, and then that being only 9 feet till you get to the property line, stacking, and that stacking then blocking the entryway into the site from Jackson Street. And so then people stopping to wait for the cars to get out could then potentially back up into the Jackson Street right-of-way, which Jackson's pretty heavily traveled and would not be good. So we did have quite a bit of concern with that. However, when we did continue to review it, some of that concern went away, and we did support it, primarily because there are multiple options as designed to get out of the site. You could, rather than going to Jackson, if there's backup there, go right and then exit either up to Pearl and go to the controlled intersection there, or down to Marion and then taking Marion out to Jackson, or west to wherever you're going. The other consideration that came with this, when we looked at the 09 recommendation for the site plan approval or the development plan approval, it did contain a drive-through, a single-lane drive-through. This is a 3-lane, potentially for a restaurant at that time. It had the same setback, and that went through without concern at that time. So, taking those things into account, staff would be in support of the base standard modification for that reduced lateral clearance. I had mentioned before, and it might look better if I go to this color. It's much, much smaller. Pedestrian access is very extensive on the site. The petitioner has put in sidewalks both directly from Jackson, directly from Pearl, crossing through a sitting area with sort of a kind of a formal patio area with quite a bit of green space. The access for pedestrian goes all the way around the building except for the drive-through area. It continues down to the drive aisle on Jackson. It continues west to the refuse enclosure and the island separating the parking lots. So those walkways are very extensive and very suitable for the site. Let me go back to the site plan itself. Signage, and it's kind of hard to see, signage plans were not submitted or included with the packet. They do not show any wall signs on the renderings of the site itself. The base zoning would allow a 10% of wall area for signage, much reduced from what you see on the frontage roads, and would allow 800 square feet of signage on the site. Staff does recommend a condition, because of the sensitivity of this area and the redevelopment area, that a signage package be brought back to the Plan Commission for final approval, not just be brought back to staff, so that you bring that back to the Plan Commission, just because the sensitivity of the site. Most times we're very comfortable approving it on our own, and I think you've had faith in us doing that, but in this case we'd like to bring that back. Landscaping, and this is a landscape plan, again, much better seen in your packets, I'm sure. The landscape numbers far exceed our code requirements for the site. They are putting 18 trees on the site, about 73 shrubs. The trees are kind of situated primarily at the north side of the lot, but also on the south perimeter as well. You have the 2 large green space areas in those spots. They did particular attention for tree placement around that patio and sitting area to kind of give it more of that park-like setting, even though it is private property. One thing we did notice, that they are going to need a few trees added into the landscape islands in the internal parking lot. And we are also recommending that some landscaping be included on the Jackson Street frontage, where the drive-through is pointing, where the headlights would be pointing out to Jackson Street, to kind of block some of those headlights and also kind of block off that drive aisle a little bit better. Another thing I guess I'd want to point out is that there's a generous amount of shrubs of a lot of different species located along the building's west, east, and north foundation walls. So the building itself is going to be heavily landscaped, and that landscaping follows through and follows that 4-foot stone piered and wrought iron fence that's being placed along the street frontage of both north of the building on Pearl and on Jackson, and kind of just has an opening there where that walkway and park-like setting goes in. Lighting plans for the site have not been included with the submittal either. It's not something we typically require. It would have to meet code as far as light levels go. But we do want to point out that that we would suggest low-level pedestrian lighting be included on this site, especially around that patio and seating area for security reasons, just for safety reasons, and to make it kind of inviting in the evenings. So we are recommending a condition to approve, well, a condition that low-level pedestrian lighting be included. Stormwater detention, much like the last project we just talked about, was established when this whole area was developed, and this site would utilize that established facilities. There are on this site itself 2 biofiltration areas. Those would be maintained, retained by this property owner, and utilized as well. But the stormwater would wrap in with the whole development area. As I had said, I don't know if I said it before, but formal elevations were not supplied with the application packet. But what the petitioner did supply were renderings, which are much like elevations, just a little bit less technical. It doesn't call out materials and that kind of thing, and they're very small on the screen. And again, I have to apologize for that. I wish we were in the other room. But you can see that up on the top left is the site itself, site plan. In the center on the left is how the building would be placed on the site. You can see what's on the bottom there is Jackson Street. So you can see the building itself has a central roof that's raised a little bit higher, elevated than the rest of the roof. It's heavily windowed, and I'll kind of get to some example pictures in a second. And then why don't I just go to them right now. So here's a couple example pictures on the right-hand side on the north. That is a facility in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Very similar design. I think it's pretty close. The materials are going to be matching. The design itself is going to be very similar. The building shape is a little bit different, but not drastically. So it is a prototypical Bank First National building. That said, there's one in Sheboygan and Two Rivers. There's one being built in Appleton right now. The exterior of the building would be a mixture of stone and glass and wood siding, so it's not by no means going to be any type of a boring building or a detrimental building to the area. It's a very high quality design. There's some pictures of the interior as well. Interior is also very well done. Staff was very impressed with the building's architecture, especially for its size, and it's generally square shape. So as I had said, you can kind of see those pictures of the Sheboygan facility and the Two Rivers facility, but the Sheboygan's in there. But since we did not have any final building elevations itself, and we're kind of going off of renderings and pictures from other sites, we are recommending that a condition of that final building elevations would be brought back to the Plan Commission as well when they bring back the landscape plan for final design review, and that would be prior, obviously, to any kind of permit issuance. And then again, with this site, the same as what you've been hearing, maybe we have to ask for details on the refuse enclosures a little bit more, but that hasn't been included with the packet. We are recommending that match the building materials and complement the design. And with that, I was kind of going over, that's the site as proposed in the proposal for the development plan. I'll go over really quickly some of the features of the 2003 design guidelines. What we're also going to be looking at tonight, or what you're going to be looking at or making a judgment call on tonight, is whether analyzing how these fit in with our redevelopment guidelines from 2003. The purpose of that 2003 effort was to be able to share certain guidelines with future developers, property owners, also reviewers such as yourselves and the council at the forefront of any development process. to let everybody involved know what was expected. And I think you received in your packets, this is the redevelopment plan itself and the guidelines. So we'll be referring to some of the pages in there, but I think I have most of them up on the screen. So again, when I was talking about the redevelopment area, it shows that at 3 phases here, and this, what we're talking about in this development is Phase 2. Phase 2 encompasses those apartment buildings, Morgan Crossing, the area, the 6.4 acres we were just talking about. Then it also includes that corner of Marion and Jackson, the southwest corner, which is the last redevelopment site there along the riverfront. And so that's kind of the area that these guidelines took into account. I do want to point out that the guidelines weren't intended at all to stifle any type of architectural or site design creativity, but really what it was attempting to do was kind of set the recommendations for design as development moved forward into the area. And the design guidelines really focused on 2 main sections. But I'm going to zoom down and in your packets a little more detail. This breaks it down into actual parcels. What we're looking at here is parcel H, which is a very large piece. We're looking really at the northeastern part of parcel H. And you can't see it, unfortunately, on this image on the screen. But when we get to some of the recommendations that I'll get to later, you'll see how these plans relate to them. And this again is parcel site parameters and plans, breaking it down into specific parcel areas. Primary one we're talking about is parcel H, which is obviously up on the corner. You can see it's showing a rough idea where building footprints should be, where parking should be. So when we get specific, this was the actual site plan parameters for parcel H. Some of the items on there was attempting to create a strong street presence and a street wall, so buildings up to the street, not in the back. Parking would be screened from the street itself. It did recommend densities at about 0.65, which is pretty considerable density. That would be the building being 65%, all the floors added together for a floor area ratio, being 65% of the area of the site. So to make it really simple, if you had a 100 square foot site on all levels of the building, you'd have to have 65 square feet of floor area for building. To give you a quick explanation of the floor area ratio. It also recommended heights to allow buildings to have the appearance, 1-story commercial buildings to have the appearance of 25 feet high. And it did, as I had mentioned earlier, recommended a street wall presence on the site. And you can kind of see these things laid out on the plan, on the guidelines itself. This again is a more detailed cross-section or site plan example of what that site would look like if it followed all of the design guidelines to a T. And this was an alternative site plan that showed a little bit more development, a little more open space in between the buildings. And this was kind of defining that street edge purpose and that street edge condition. This graphic is particularly important because you'll see on the left side it shows a very large terrace which currently exists on Jackson Street between the property line and the pavement of the street itself. It is proposed in the future that Jackson Street will be widened in this direction and that terrace area will be drastically reduced. So what you see out there today probably will not remain that wide. So you can kind of see on this graphic on the right-hand side that reduction. There'll still be a terrace there, but the concept of that being reduced is on there. So again, kind of looking at those items that we kind of quickly went over, this was the site plan that we reviewed against those conditions or those guidelines that were in the redevelopment plans. We also looked at the elevations of the building. This is obviously the Sheboygan example. And we came up with a couple alternatives, and I'm going to go back to those in a second. But what I really wanted to get on is this overall analysis. We looked at 2 things, the site plan parameters and also the character objectives of the redevelopment plan itself. And so first thing, we looked at the use. A bank is a consistent use with the development guidelines for this redevelopment area, so that obviously would match. That is a yes. It is compliant. Density was far lower than what was recommended in the plan itself. Again, the redevelopment plan recommended a very, very high density for this area. So this is much, much reduced as one-story building, not a large building. The floor area is only .01, where the plan is recommending a .65. Height of the building, we didn't have elevation plans, so we really couldn't tell exactly how tall the building was. It appeared to be somewhere around 20 feet, 18 to 20 feet. So that could be increased to 25 and would meet the objectives of that site plan parameter. And then the last item was the street wall. Trying to get that street wall presence along the street. In this case, staff felt that that did not meet the parameters in that only 25% of the building itself created that street presence. However, they did utilize the fencing and the piered and wrought iron fencing to try to make that street wall as well. One of our thoughts on that was you could potentially rotate the building counterclockwise to the north. That would bring 50% of the building along the street frontage. And I'll kind of go back to those kind of concept plans, and you'll see that they're very conceptual in a second. We looked at the character objectives as well, and the first one was creating that strong street edge. We didn't feel that it did create that strong street edge, but that the petitioner's intent was to do that by adding the wall and the fence line. Compatibility, yes, we felt the building was compatible with other buildings in the area. Very nice building. It was built to last. It would be a complement to the area and to the city. There were a lot of Objective 3 was pedestrian activity. There was a lot of, or connectivity, excuse me. That says activity, but a lot of interaction for the pedestrian there that definitely did not design specifically for cars, even though it does have a drive-through. There are quite a few pedestrian access ways and amenities proposed for the site. So we did feel it met that objective. Constructed to last, I kind of just hit that. Yes, the building is definitely durable materials, and it's not a design that that you take up and take down just like that. Context of Oshkosh, we felt the building was in context with Oshkosh and in context with the feel of our community. And the last objective, number 6, was on-site parking separation. We did not feel that that was separated. They did have parking located on Pearl and parking located on Jackson, so in front of the building, which is something also ties back into that street presence. However, it was about half of the parking. The other half was situated to the west of the building, so take that in consideration as well. I'm going to kind of go back to these drawings. Staff did a couple just real quick engineering drawings to try to figure out site plans to figure out how we could get more of a street presence on Jackson Street in particular, but also to try to pull that parking off of Pearl. And this is the first thing I alluded to a couple times. We rotated the building 90 degrees and basically pulled it up next to Jackson. The drive-through now would be on the west side of the building rather than the south side. The drive lane would come in off of the shared drive that comes off of Pearl and leads down to Marion, would enter, and then you could exit out the site through Jackson, or you could continue down to Marion, or you could continue up and go back up to Pearl. We kind of had pitched that to the applicant or the petitioner. They had felt that there was too much issue with a good piece of the parking lot having to cross that drive aisle, that 3-lane drive-through drive aisle to get into the building itself. So we kind of rotated it again, left the site kind of the same. We widened the drive-through a little bit, and you can see it's very rough again, done in pen. Widen that drive lane to give more stacking for the drive-through. We cut off the connectivity down to on the far east side, getting rid of that lateral clearance issue, and we situated basically all of the parking on the south or on the west, and none of it would have to cross the drive-through traffic to access the bank itself, to try to help out with that situation. You'll see there were some variations here. Do you want an outlet onto that Jackson Street drive aisle? That could be accommodated, but both of these rotation designs, rotating the building, would allow for that street presence on Jackson of the building wall. It would allow for the entryway to be right up on Pearl at the corner, the north entryway in this case. The south entryway would again be servicing the parking lot. Kind of hide that drive-through behind the building. Yes, there would still be some parking situated on the Jackson Street frontage, but far less than in the proposal. And there would be no parking in front of the building and the street. frontage. You could also include a green space in this, on the north side of the building or within the island area, but probably on the north side of the building, to provide that better pedestrian connectivity. So, I guess with all that, we have two items, again, A and B. The first is the Plan Commission. Everybody, staff and the applicant, is asking the Plan Commission to make a determination that the proposal and the proposed development is consistent with the Marion Road, Pearl Avenue redevelopment Phase 2 development guidelines. Should the Plan Commission feel that the development is not consistent with those guidelines, you could recommend against the proposal, or you could, you may recommend various conditions be incorporated that would make it more consistent. Sort of as discussed, 5 of the 9 design guidelines were met, and 4, I believe it was 4 of the 6 site plan characteristics were met. So 1, you don't have a staff recommendation on the consistency element, but the plan development itself, we are recommending approval for, with basically 12 conditions. Based on a modification for the 0 side yard setback, that the sign package be brought back to the Plan Commission, the building elevations be brought back to the Plan Commissions for approval, the site lighting be pedestrian scale and approved by the Department of Community Development, the dumpster enclosure be consistent with the principal building architecture and materials, the cross-access easements, well, those are established, base standard modification to allow 9-foot lateral clearance on the Jackson Street property line for the drive-through exit lane. Walkways be delineated with pavement markings or alternative paving materials where they cross vehicular drive aisles. The proposed ground identity sign be monument style, consistent with other signs in the redevelopment area. Low-level pedestrian lighting be included on the patio sitting area. Landscaping be positioned in the setback area along Jackson in front of the drive-through with the intent to soften and buffer that pavement area from headlights. And materials used for the refuse enclosure match or complement the main building's materials, which I think may have been a double.
Same as fire.
Yes, sorry.
That it? All right,
That's it.
You ready? Technical questions, start with David.
A couple of questions, and I'll give you the questions and you can respond them all at one time.
Okay.
We had a workshop session
On this
and some
project.
general comments. What were the messages? Could you refresh us what the messages were that we left the applicant with?
From the workshop?
I'm sorry?
From the workshop itself?
From the workshop.
Okay.
Secondly, on page 14, lower bottom, there's a picture. There's a graphic of the how it will look from Jackson Street. It's labeled southeast corner, but I don't see a picture in the Sheboygan pictures. Did they provide that picture? Because that's what it's sort of a head-on picture of what it'll look like with the drive-through in Jackson. And then the last, on page 16, on the lower left-hand corner, there's an interesting architectural detail. It looks like an entranceway, but I'm not sure where that shows up on the model. And where does that show up? Where does that, on a real-time basis, where does that show up in this?
Let me answer them backwards for you.
All right.
Okay, the first one, the entryway, as we said, with elevation drawings, we'd be able to tell exactly if the entrance was like this or if it's going to be on both sides like that. But this was sort of the example they had given us to look at. The entryways are both on the east and west side of the building. That was one of the reasons we're asking for the elevations to come back. I'm not sure if it's going to look exactly like this. What you can see is the concept there with the raised roof of that building is what you're going to see in this project as well. That's why we're asking for the elevations to come back. I'm not sure if the entrance will match this. I'm sure it'll be similar. It doesn't show up in the renderings very well. The second item was whether the picture showing, if we received any pictures from the Sheboygan showing the drive-through entrance. The Sheboygan, I could go to the thing, but the Sheboygan site itself is laid out a little bit different, so that that drive-through, I believe the drive-through's on the north side of the building, it's not at the corner. So it wouldn't be shown from the corner, it'd be on the, I believe it's on the back side of the building. But no, they didn't supply a rendering of how that would look, or a picture from Sheboygan, how that looks. Then the last item, which was your first item, was from the workshop. I don't know, I'm gonna ask Darren if he can summarize the comments that came out of there. I think, if I can summarize it from memory, the concept of a bank on the site was, you didn't have an objection to the bank itself, you didn't have an objection to a drive-through at the site itself, but you weren't too sure on the site design, but I can't,
All right.
I can't recall.
That tees it up absolutely perfectly, thank you.
Steve?
Yeah.
Just to follow up to David's comment and then your comment, how can we vote on something if we don't know exactly what it's going to look like?
Well, that's why we're asking for that element to come back. I mean, if you find it consistent with the redevelopment plan, and you know, the site layout works for you, and you're willing to grant the base standard modifications, we can bring those elements that either weren't supplied or weren't completed back for final approval.
Because that's what they're calling for here.
That's what we're recommending, yep. The elevations and the landscaping.
Gary?
Yes. In the staff report, it says that the development improvements would be a value of no less than $2 million. Is that construction value or assessed value?
I believe that's, the petitioner probably answer that better, but I believe that's assessed value.
Assessed value.
That was something that was in their application material.
Oh, okay, I didn't read that, unfortunately. Second question, again, probably the applicant needs to answer this. In regards to the number of employees at this facility, is Bank One's facility at the, basically, a little bit, west of that, going to be closed at the city center? Going to be closed, and the people are going to be moved to this facility, or is this just a second facility within the city? The third point I want to make, question I guess, is it's my definition that guidelines are basically recommendations, not policy, and quite frankly, with recommendation A consistent to Phase 1 development guidelines, I do not think that they are consistent, that this proposal is consistent. When you have 4 or 9 guidelines that are not met, that does not portray consistency to me. However, since these are guidelines and not policy, I think it's okay to say that the guidelines for this particular project do not apply. That's it, Mr.
Other technical questions, go with Ed and then Chuck. Just so I understand what we're looking at here, the LER report from 2003, if I remember correctly, that is sort of incorporated by reference into our comprehensive plan as sort of an ancillary document that we've sort of appended to it over the years as we've updated that.
Yeah, we were referred to it.
Okay. And when this, and just to understand the process, I guess, when this goes to the RDA granted an option on this in July, I think it said in the report. When the RDA reviews whatever they review, and I don't know what the RDA reviews, but are they reviewing in the context of the comprehensive plan, in the context of design standards? Are they reviewing that? Are they just looking at a purchase agreement in front of them saying, here are the terms of the contract, go to town and see what you can do? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand that.
They do look at multiple things. One is the financial impact, but they also looked at the concept, because the applicant did provide a concept back in July of this year, but it's been several months in developing the project to this point, and the RDA has not seen all the details, just the concept at this point, and they were in support of the concept when it was submitted.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks,
Jeff. One, I agree that the Marion Road redevelopment area was a guideline, and my question is how many of the guidelines did we not adhere to when we allowed the Morton pharmacy? Because again, I know they had issues, and we did put that fence up to give that strong presence. That's one of the reasons why we actually did that, and we did some other things. But so I want to know, so if I can say, hey, if this is consistent, it's going to be consistent with what we've already done over there for me.
Well, I think you got to look at that review that occurred at the time. When we were reviewing that, when we were doing that review at the time, it was part of a package. So the Morton, we knew that the Morton did not meet the guidelines. But as part of the counterbalance of that proposal was going to be that two-story sitting on the corner of Pearl and Jackson. So if you look at it in that context, that was why it was approved. The Plan Commission at the time recognized there was an offset. We were going to put this two-story building on the corner. We're going to let you waiver from the guidelines here, and we're going to make you install that fence.
That was the only one of the three developments that would have met the guidelines, because the AccuCom doesn't meet it either.
AccuCom meets the guidelines.
It's two-story, but it's not.
Parking's behind.
It's not up to the.
Yes, it is.
The main entrance is not, just the
Yeah, but the building
is
creates,
on that one.
the building is up against the street at the corner there.
Yeah. Well, the end of this building is up to the street too.
Then that's
Well,
why
I say the same thing. I mean, we're just,
No, the parking's behind it to the south, so yeah.
yeah, and the parking is to a certain degree, the majority of the parking is behind this. I mean, I can make an argument either way. I mean, so for me, I'm trying to, I'm struggling with
That's why you're
to say
asking to
whether
make that
it's,
call.
well, I'm struggling with to say, oh, this doesn't meet or it does meet, when I have other developments in there that don't meet, and they're conditioned on this one meeting. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, we did do some things on the Morton we did change some of the design to make that work. And I get that, okay? It's a little difficult for me to say that it doesn't or does meet without knowing some of the other details as to whether if the building meets the 25 feet, well, that's one more thing that it meets. And I don't know if we said how much of the building has to front one of the streets. We just said it has to butt up next to the street, and that is the main entrance, that is butting up next to the street. So for me, yes, it's only a piece of the full, but I don't think the guidelines say how much of the building has to front that street.
No, you're right.
Okay, so that's why I was wondering, I mean, I can also, I mean, without knowing, like I said, that they have the fence here, and I noticed they didn't continue it down on the hell's that?
Jackson Street.
South Street, yeah, down Jackson Street, which you could, and still say, okay, that starts to create that strong presence, on the building, street length part.
David?
This is as much of a process question as a technical question. There's some significant things that are missing in this presentation. Elevations, what it's really going to look like. Are these pictures representative of really what the facility is going to look like? For my mind, particularly, serious concerns if they heard to think about rotating the building 90 degrees so that the drive-through wasn't facing Jackson Street. The bulk of the building is, are we prepared to make a decision tonight, and at the end of the day say, let's lay it over? Or are we better off to say, hey, let's come back with the full package and make a complete presentation?
Could we address that? I don't know if it's out of order, but it's important for us to address why the package isn't complete at this point.
That's fine. Yeah, I think we're
still a technical question, so we're not.
Give us a technical.
We're not quite there yet.
Doing technical questions.
I'm Bob Grigorski. I'm on the board of directors for Bank First National. We also have Bill Aubrey with us. One thing, and I don't, if you want to continue with technical questions, I just want you to know that I'm here to answer them. But one of the things we did here, we have an option to purchase this property. And before we do full-blown plans for the site, we met with staff over a 2-month period and went through various site plans and various renderings of the building. And what we said with staff was, what we need to do is get before Plan Commission to see if this site is appropriate if you buy into this building being part of the Marion Road Development Plan, before we would do full-blown plans. But having said that, this is a prototypical building. It's going to be an 8,000 square foot main office building for Bank First National. The office building that you're looking at, the pictures from Sheboygan, is approximately a 7,400 square foot building. We're doing the same building in Two Rivers, which is approximately a 4,000 square foot building, so it's about half the size, but it has all the same features of the building. So the reason that, and we're also doing the same thing in Appleton at the old Paradise Club site, which is also about a 4,200 square foot building. Again, prototypical, pretty much the same design. So the reason that we asked staff to put in that we come back for full elevation and approval of the design was because at that point, after we know that the building will fit on this site, then we can continue to have Hoffman, spend the money to have Hoffman design the building to fit the site and be specific with the size. So that's the reason.
Okay, Donna.
I have the comment on the concept. I like the concept very much. I think that you can work with this, and I like the idea that you would have the drive-through behind on the west side. And as far as the discussion on Morton's, I think that your end result with the Morton's property was certainly very nice for the city. So those would be my comments as you move forward.
Okay, any other technical questions? As long as we got, okay, seeing none, any other questions for petitioner as long as he's here?
Yes.
Yeah, question for
Jeff?
petitioner. There's been some discussion about the building actually being rotated so that the drive-through aisle doesn't face Jackson, is I think one of the concerns. And so that maybe more portion of the building fronts either Jackson or, is that Pearl?
Pearl.
Or Pearl?
Correct.
Is that something that you guys, I know there was a couple renderings that staff put together. Is that something that you can consider so that it'll make it more amenable for us to say that this meets, the guidelines of the Marion Road Pearl Avenue District?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, if you can.
Yep.
First of all, let me just tell you that the site is a very difficult site. There's 2 biofilters that are existing on the site. There's an existing environmental cap, and there's a 40 to 50 foot electrical easement that bisects the site. So when you start talking about density and how many square feet you can put on the site, the site actually plays out about half the size. So if you go back to the site plan, you'll see the easement that runs through it. You'll see a number of limiting factors that run through the site. What we did as a bank, the first thing that we did after the workshop meeting, and the question that David asked was what happened at the workshop meeting. The workshop meeting, we talked about the appropriateness of this building for the site. We also talked about the size of the building and the amount of the increment that we were going to produce. And that increment was an assessed valuation of up to a $2 million increase in increment. But what we did at that point at the workshop, after the workshop, what we did is we engaged Hoffman, and this was about a 2-month process. What we did is we asked them, create multiple site plans on this site and put the building in every possible orientation. Put the drive-through, every possible except for the drive-through on the front, because we knew that wouldn't work, because that wasn't consistent with the guidelines. So we put the drive-through on the north, the south, and we put it on the back side of the building. And we have those with us, because this was a 2-month process and a deep review into all these site plans. And it's difficult to say that some things don't work, but the drive-through on the backside of the building doesn't work on this site. We tried it. And what we had is we had cross-traffic conflicts. We had bad stacking into the drive-through. Initially, we had pedestrian access that would walk up through drive lanes. The last plan, we didn't see the second concept plan till today, but the plan before that had a 3 aisle-wide drive where we had an S entrance into the primary customer parking that crossed over the right-hand exiting drive-through. And those types of issues, and not only that, it also had if you were approaching from Jackson Street, you had to make a left, a right, and then a hard right, almost like a U-turn movement to get in the drive-through. If you're coming from Pearl, you'd have to make a left, another left, and then you'd have to make a hard right to get to the drive-through. Again, those are all uncomfortable movements for a drive-through customer. So what we did is we went through all those options, and we actually, when this was presented by Hoffman, we had all those options in front of the board, in front of our design professionals, in front of our engineers, and we eliminated them one by one because of certain reasons. And actually, the last proposal that we got on Friday, we just got that proposal on Friday. We identified all the safety concerns and the traffic movement concerns that we had with that proposal. So the short answer is, we think that the site plan that we proposed works, and I think that it's consistent with the Marion Road guidelines. And let me just tell you why I think it's consistent. First of all, as I said, the site is very difficult. It's a difficult site, and we worked hard, a 2-month period, to try to get a site plan that works. We did look at the other buildings out on the site, and I know that those don't control, and I know that the original Morton building was part of a package, and that package had a long building that was alongside the site. What's kind of cool to look at is if you look at the 2009 notes that are attached to your package, you'll see some comments from Dumpke at that time, back in 2009, and this started in 2003. Some of the Dumpke comments were, the site is very difficult, the site has bad access, the site is not attractive to national retail, we cannot get franchises in there. So what they did is they set up that building, which was kind of a wish list, I think, for what the city of Oshkosh wanted. They wanted a long building along the street. They wanted residences upstairs, which I think at the time didn't work, and they wanted some retail at the bottom. Ultimately, what happened after, I think, a number of years with options on that site is that plan couldn't come together. So what we did is we said, how can, and then if you talk about the Morton Pharmacy site, and you say, how does that show the street presence? Well, really, that's a 0. I mean, as far as built on the street, when you say that ours is 25% of our building on the street, the Morton Pharmacy is 0. So what we did is we said, how much of our building can we put on the street? Now, most of you probably go through banks and you go through drive-throughs. The typical drive-through circulates around a building. So we started out already with a difficult site where we had to take the front of the building and put it up against the street. We dealt with the biofilter that's on the south side of the site, and we created a drive-through that was pre-existing, that already existed on the site. That was step one. The entrance that we placed on the front of the building, we did that to try to be consistent with the guidelines. We put there was a question, I can't remember who asked the question, as to what entrances were really going to be there. There's going to be a prominent front entrance, and there's going to be a prominent back entrance. And what we did is we put 25% of the building. You're correct that it's the narrow side of the building. But our drive-through, we'd be happy to show you pictures of the drive-throughs. I'd love somebody to maybe go to Sheboygan or go to Two Rivers and take a look at our drive-throughs. They're a curved element with an underside wood covering. It's not the typical drive-through that you'd see 10, 15 years ago on a bank building. These are actually an architectural feature to our building. So when we say that there's 25% facing the Jackson Street, that's just the physical facade of the building. There's also another 25% which represents the drive-through canopy, which I think is an architectural element. You guys may disagree, but I think if you look at it, you'll see that it's an architectural element. So we tried to do that, and we actually asked Hoffman to create an architectural element with that drive-through to increase the streetscape. So that was the second thing that we tried to do to follow the guidelines. The employee, the other thing we talked a little bit about is what's the impact of the building. Currently, we have 10 employees at the City Center building. Those employees would be ramped up to 12 to 13 when this building opens. The City Center facility, Gary, would close. That facility would close, and this would be a replacement facility, not an additional facility. And the ultimate plan was to have 16 to 18 employees there. I would argue, and I'm here to, I guess, here to argue, but I agree with some of the points that these are guidelines and they're not policy. And what we've tried to do as a bank, we've tried to meet them as best as we can, but still have a facility that creates a positive experience for a customer. You don't ever want to say that you wouldn't do something because nobody wants to draw lines in the sand. But I can tell you that we've exhausted all the avenues and we've exhausted every rotation. And what we're asking today is for you as a planning commission to look at our site and say, look, this does meet the Marion Road guidelines. It certainly meets it better than the AccuCom and the Morton building, I can tell you that. And give us some direction so we can move forward. We have a couple things that we want to do after this. We need to be able to waive or go ahead and move forward with our option to purchase. And I'm not sure, Darren, when that expires, but I think it's in March. There's an extension date in March? Okay. I think we have an extension date coming up in March where we pay a fee to extend. But what we have to do is we have to be confident that we can go ahead and waive our contingencies within that option to purchase and spend the money to design the building. And as soon as the Plan Commission, if the Plan Commission comes out and says, look, it doesn't meet our Marion Road guidelines, we don't want this building in Oshkosh, then I guess we won't be in this site. But if they do come out and say, we like this plan, we think that the developer and the bank has done a good job trying to meet our guidelines, it's a benefit, and it's going to create great increment for this site, then what we're going to do is go ahead and create the final plans. We'll bring those back before you. You'll see those architectural elevations. You'll see everything that we've said that we're going to promise in that handout. And obviously, if we don't deliver that, at that time, you just say that it doesn't fit with what you told us that you were going to bring to us.
Kathy?
Yeah. No, thank you for that explanation.
Very good.
And I want to say up front that I'm all for the bank, and I hope we can work something out. But I don't agree with the staff characterization on some of this. I understand it's a difficult site, so you've explained that. Frankly, the architectural compatibility, call it objective number 2 under character objectives on our little chart. This seems to me, it may be a beautiful building, and the staff was impressed with the architecture, but it seems to me to be out of place in that environment. It doesn't seem compatible with, not that AccuCom is a beautiful building, it's not, but it's not compatible with the Morton's type of buildings, not compatible with probably the New River Place buildings going up. It looks frankly too modern. It looks ultra modern to me. And I wish that it weren't a cookie cutter. I understand why you want to do a prototype because it saves money.
Kathleen, I just have to say to you that this building doesn't save money. So this is one of the most expensive buildings, bank buildings you'll ever see. It's not cookie cutter. Each one is individually designed. And I would 100% agree with you. It looks nothing like the Morton Pharmacy, and it looks nothing like AccuCom.
Yeah, and that's what...
If the design of Morton Pharmacy and AccuCom are a 5 on a scale of 10, this is a 20. So.
And then just my perspective is the architecture with the rounded roof seems out of place. And so I would dispute that does meet the objectives. But right now I won't complain anymore, and we'll hear what people have to say.
I just to counter that, I would say it's not our job to evaluate architecture. However, to me, it has a Frank Lloyd Wright quality to it in terms of certain elements of this. Of the 3 buildings, if you put this on there with AccuCom and Morton, I think this would be by far the most attractive building. And given the limitations you have with this site, I'm not sure we're going to do much better. But Gary.
Yeah, I have actually no problem with tentatively agreeing to the B recommendations. I do have a problem with the A recommendations, but I guess we can resolve that later on in the meeting. The question I wanted to ask the applicant, for the record, is about the value of the improvement, the $2 million. Is that assessed valuation or cost?
Yeah, it's new assessed valuation. We expect the building to cost more than $2 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Darren, in the guidelines, I mean, they're guidelines.
Correct.
What leeway do we have to take the proposed design and, because one of the things I notice on the design here on the north side, you have the iron rod fence. It's going to have a lot of landscaping around. They actually put landscaping, some additional landscaping where you have a seating area and stuff. I don't see what's wrong with that in that location at all. Because again, it's not far from the Riverwalk. So that kind of stuff I think would be an enhancement to what the guidelines had, where we're going to have this big long building. Instead, we have more green space. That to me is a trade-off. So I guess my question is, what kind of leeway do we have? Like I said, I mean, he's got 25% of the building. If you use the canopy, you got more. But he's got 25% of the building, and our guidelines doesn't say how much we're supposed to have. It just says you got to front it. Okay, to me, it does that. It's subject to interpretation, but if there's additional things like we were saying that we can actually delineate, the frontage by putting, the fence or stuff like what we did over in Morton's, to try and attempt to do. Does those kind of guidelines, or does those kind of features satisfy the guidelines per se? I mean, that's the question we're asking. We're saying, here's a dock. Okay, it doesn't look like what this dock says. Okay, fine. Doesn't look like it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't meet those requirements. Because, like I said, it is pushed up. It's not a building that's sitting out here with parking all the way around it. It is pushed up to here. And there are some other hardscape features that set that road presence. So I'm asking, is that enough to say that it meets that criteria? For item A, I think that's what I'm struggling with.
That's why you're getting paid the big bucks to be around this table to make that determination.
The whole $1,
No, really,
that's a raise.
You're
right?
getting
$1?
Yeah, that's a raise.
Really, the point is the guidelines, you said, the guidelines aren't enforceable. I mean, the guidelines set a guide for us to review as part of, remember, this is all city land. It's all been city acquired, it's all been city purchased land. So really what the guidelines are is a starting point for the discussions for us to evaluate each one of these developments too. Now, we can waiver anything like we've done it. We did it with the Mortons. Morton's done this, still argues over as a part of an overall package, but yeah, you can waiver them. At the end of the day, you're providing a recommendation. The reason we're asking for recommendation A was this still has to go to Common Council, still has to go to the RDA. Both of those bodies should know whether the developments that are coming through are consistent with adopted or at least plans that are out there. So that's why that's in there. If you don't feel it meets those guidelines or you have suggestions with how it should go, I think that should be included as part of the plan development review or as part of that determination of consistency. It's kind of similar, we've heard this, we've been battling over this, not battling, we've been discussing this for every time we have something that gets developed along Riverfront. First thing I hear from this group is we don't have a plan. We don't have a plan. Well, now I show you that we have some guidelines or a plan, and we're supposed to be reviewing for consistency with that plan. So that's what's going to be bubbling up and move.
But that's where I'm asking. That's where I'm looking at. I'm looking at it right now and saying I don't see where it's not consistent. Because there is a piece of the building that's fronting. Yes, maybe some of the parking lot isn't in the right area. However, there's enough hardscape, landscape or hardscape going around that to actually provide that edge.
That's understood.
And again, I mean, if they come back and they don't say, I mean, with the actual design of the building and we aren't up to 25 feet or whatever, I mean, yeah, we can always say, no, you gotta increase it another 5 feet.
You look at it in the context of...
With the review that you've already said in B has to come back here anyway. Right? All right.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you have...
A response to that?
Yeah.
We just, when I talked to the architect, I think our building was 24 feet at the top of the pitch. We can certainly do 25 if that knocks off another one of those requirements. Second thing is that wall, that's actually something that we met with staff to come up with. So Darren was a part of that. That was actually, I think, his suggestion to do that party wall, right? That was his. And then the last thing. What's that?
After my other suggestions.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you wanted the building turned, but that was your suggestion as a compromise to the building. And the other thing is, even if the building is turned, if you looked at that alternative, what happened was the parking flipped. The parking flipped to the opposite side. It flipped to the south side of the building. It was still up against the road. Okay? So all you gained was the width of the building, because the parking still was on the road. Under our plan and under the revised plan, the parking was still up against the road. So.
Ed? Bob, the thing that I'm seeing here, I guess, as sort of the number that sticks out to me is the density number.
Yep.
So I guess, can you address, was there any consideration, I mean, the way that you, I mean, that's a pretty big gulf there from a 0.65 floor area ratio to a 0.01 floor area ratio. Did you guys look at potentially changing, numerator or denominator there by either making the parcel smaller and potentially leaving an adjacent parcel for future development of another building, or looking at, adding a second floor, doing mixed use? I mean, that's kind of the only way you can attack that number, is by changing one end of that theory, and that's, I guess, can you address whether or not you guys looked at anything along those lines?
A couple of things. First of all, the building's an 8,000 square foot bank building. Our typical prototype drive-through like in Two Rivers in Appleton is 4,200 to 4,400 square feet. That's very similar to what most other companies are doing. 8,000 square feet is a main bank building. This has additional banking offices, support staff, other things that would be in a downtown bank location. So 8,000 is actually a big building for us. This site, there's no way you could divide this site up and have 2 users on it. If you take a look at the constraints, we barely got the 8,000 square foot building on here with 2 biofilters and the easement. Our building, the corner of our building, actually is right up to the easement. You realize you can't build in that easement. So we have a 50-foot wide swath right through the center of the parcel that can't be built on. So there's really there's no way you could get a second user on here. As far as a second story, we don't need a 16,000 square foot building. And as far as...
I was thinking more mixed use as far as something along those lines.
Yeah, it doesn't work for us. I get how before they had a pizza restaurant, they had some retail. Some housing units above that might work. For a banking facility, we really don't want residences above our bank, so it doesn't work for us. But I can see how it would work for other users.
Steve?
Thanks, Tom. 2 comments, really. The first is, I agree with you, Tom. Architecturally, I think it addresses what we've been talking about as far as raising the bar architecturally. Again, I'm going by what I'm seeing in Sheboygan, so I'm assuming it'll be comparable. And I think it fits nicely with the new Welcome Center at the university. There's kind of a compatibility in the look and feel, which I think is good. The other thing that I guess is more of a concern is, in 2003, we spent a fair amount of taxpayer dollars on this plan. And I understand it's a guideline, but how far do we want to deviate from some of these guidelines after we've invested thousands of taxpayer dollars to come up with the guideline? And we say, well, we'll kind of ignore it, or we'll operate by exception, which we seem to do a lot. I understand it's that. I know it's a guideline. How much latitude do we want to give ourselves as we move forward? And I think, as I said, architecturally, I think it achieves what we're looking for. I think a bank is a good property on that location, but I think we've got to address this whole, these guidelines that we just heard from the people with the riverfront development, what people are looking for. We invest all this money in studies, and then we seem to sort of say they're nice to have, but that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Gary?
Yes, I was the staff wants to respond to Steve's comment. Okay, I have expressed concern about recommendation A. I still have that concern, but I think the project is a good project, and there is a lot of times where something is not 100% okay. So this is one of the times. So I will probably vote for. I will vote for both recommendations if the vote on combined. If the vote against, if the vote separately, I would vote against A and vote for B. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I will vote for these two recommendations.
Go ahead, David.
I guess, just to clarify, that this is the only site layout that would work?
It was the only site layout that would work for us. Yeah, we tried the drive-through on both sides. We tried it on the back. None of those sites worked. And there's some things that are banking related. Our drive-through has to be centered on the building. One of the things that we do is we work the drive-through window with tellers that we have to make sure that it's not on an odd end of a building, so you don't have a designated person working the drive-through. So there's some constraints that we put on ourselves. But the major constraint here is the fact that once we put parking behind the drive-through, which a significant amount of this parking has to be, no matter if it's on the north or the south end of the building, parking has to be behind the drive-through. The people that are coming from that parking have to make it to the building, and so they have to somehow cross over drive-through lanes, and that's a big concern for us. So that was the biggest concern.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Because technically, we're still talking about technical questions. Okay. If none, thank you very much. Anybody else in the audience here to speak to this item today, so we can make this an official public commentary?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up then.
Sure.
Because the Chase in Fond du Lac has a similar situation. That seems to work.
Of
walking in.
Walking through the drive-through lane?
Yeah.
If somebody designs a building, to walk through the drive-through lanes, and they think it works, I don't know what to tell you. I don't think it works. And I think if you think about it,
well, it works for me.
It works for you. Yeah. It's difficult for us. And actually, in this case,
that it works.
Just so we're clear, it's more than that. I mean, it's more than that. It's this case we also had the cross-traffic crossing over the drive-through too, which is difficult too. But we could show you. I have all the site plans. We brought all the site plans for the different options. If you wanted to look at them, I could go through them and show you why each one.
Let's see how this goes, and if we need to bring that out, we will.
Sure.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission. David.
I'm not sure where I stand. I'm uncomfortable, but as a big picture, it seems that we wind up with more situations like this that we try to, that we have ideas and then we try to jam something into something that fits to try to make it work. And, I'd be foolish to say that I don't relish the idea of a $2 million increment. And sometimes that's driven the whole development program down there, or at least phase 2, and along the river. That it's all about let's get the increment in, let's make let's make it work, whether it's really what we want or not. And is this really then the best? Are there enough negatives that this really isn't what should go on this parcel? And I just don't know.
Ed?
To that end, this is an excellent plan. This is a great plan. If this plan was out on 21, or on Witzel, or on Washburn, or on Kohler, we wouldn't be here at 7:10 at night still discussing it. We'd be tripping over ourselves to approve it. But the thing that, and the reason I asked that question about density here is because that's the number that I can't get out of my head. And the goal of this area is to create, I mean, the overarching theme of this document that we've made part of our comprehensive plan, the goal of this area, the goal of these standards is to create an urban, dense, downtown type feel. And this is a suburban site plan. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that. And David makes a point as to the increment, and, as plan commissioners, we tend to have to evaluate things sort of with these blinders on of, do they fit with our comprehensive plan? Now, it probably does create a good amount of increment, and it does, and that's great. And that's for Steve to consider when this gets to council. That's not necessarily for us to consider. There's a lot of things here that aren't within our purview, and to me, that .01 floor area ratio, I can't live with that because I feel that it goes against the fundamental goal of our development plan here, which is to create dense urban design patterns, and that's not what we're looking at. So I'd like to see the council approve something here, and I'd like to have the increment as a taxpayer, but I just don't know as a plan commissioner charged with reviewing this against our comprehensive plan, I don't know that I can support it the way that it sits, at least as to letter A of determination as to the redevelopment guideline. Consistent, yeah, I don't know that I can do that, so.
Okay, thank you. Steve, and then Jeff?
Looking at it.
Thank you. To really answer Adam and David a little bit, I think you've heard the council say in recent years that almost every decision we make has a really long-term impact on the city, other than special events. Those do as well. And as we did our strategic planning, everything we were doing, the strategic planning this summer was long-term everything, economic development, our neighborhoods, quality of life assets. And I think when we make a decision here, we have to look at the plan that was developed 10, 11 years ago, comprehensive plan. Does it fit, and what is the long-term impact? Do we take this plan and say, yeah, we'll always make a lot of exceptions. I think it's a bad signal to people who want to develop here when they see a plan, but they can come here and they'll know we'll kind of cave and, we'll do it for the short term. I think that's the worst thing we can do as a group is anything short term.
Jeff, and then Donna.
Can I just say one thing? When we selected to locate here, we looked all over town. We thought we could be at this sign, that sign. We decided to be downtown because it's a destination location for our organization. Our business customers are based downtown. We wanted to make downtown impact. We wanted to do something for downtown, and we thought this would be a great idea for downtown Oshkosh, something that would help continue to revitalize our community. So it was an investment in the downtown area. It's not a suburban statement. It is a downtown financial institution as a destination. There won't be another location of our organization in this community, and downtown is what we were looking to do and to create some energy for downtown.
Thank you. Jeff, and then Donna?
Well, if I look at this development, I look at the comprehensive plan, I don't see where this is contrary to the comprehensive plan. This Marion Keller Road is a guideline. One of the things we also have to plan as planners is not just what the density of a building is, not what just the architectural parting is, but what the functionality of it is and what it's serving. The last time I knew, when I was down in Milwaukee or Marion County or Madison or New York or Chicago, they had banks downtown. They had banks downtown when you wanted to have people that reside downtown. We have a lot of building going on right across the street with multiple residences. they're building a bank to service that need and service the university students. That's central. So I'm looking at it saying, if you want a plan, do we want to have just high-rise and we want to say everything has to be a certain density? No, it also has to serve a certain function, a service. That's one of the reasons why I voted for the pharmacy we put down there, because it was going to be a service in the area. We want a bank down there because it's a service in the area. It's going to draw other attractions to come down there to build because there's those services there. Geez, I could put a building up there that nobody moves into, but it's 2 stories tall, it's got a certain density for the square footage. I'm also looking at, do I want a big building there that gives me 0.8 instead of 0.6, which makes it look good, but it's a building and it has no green space, has nothing. Fits the guideline. So I look at it a little bit more than just a density. I'm looking at, I've gone down into cities and stuff where there's a standalone bank building in between bigger buildings. That doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it less urban. It just makes it different. And what's wrong with having some architectural difference in our city? We have a lot of different architecture in our city. That's what makes the city partially unique. To have another architectural distinction downtown makes sense to me. So does it fill exactly what our guidelines are? No. But that guideline was built as a guideline. It wasn't built as concrete, this is what we ought to do and never deviate from it. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm looking at this for the long term, to your point, Steve, that we have a bank that's going to be there for 20, 30 years, so that when we are developing other things around it, you have the amenities to attract those things down there, rather than, oh, I built a whole bunch of residences that are high density, or I built some office buildings, but guess what? I got to get in my car and drive to the bank, or drive to the pharmacy, or drive to where I'm going to go. That makes no sense. That's not urban. Urban is pedestrian. It's walking to these amenities. And that's what's also driving my thought process here, is to say, this isn't a bad development. Does it meet every guideline that we have? No. But that's the flexibility that we have as a city. And it meets most of the guidelines that we have. Can we do some things to give it that hardscape to make sure that it meets a 25-foot? Sure. Does it miss on one item? Yes, it does. But it's also providing some additional things that the next thing that we wait for down the road may not provide. And now we lose out because we stick to these guidelines set forth, and we have all these things, but guess what? There's certain amenities that we don't have downtown. That's what's urban, is having all the different amenities, not just a building or not just a concentration level. So for me, I don't see where it meets everything, but it's not significant enough for me to say that it doesn't meet the guidelines, and to bring back and then say, hey, let's look at what we can do to make it work, rather than, oh, it doesn't work, let's move on and wait for something else.
Thank you. Donna?
Yes, I agree with what Jeff has just said. I was not in a part of this plan when it was being conceived, and so I'm not held to it as those who are sitting at the table that were involved in the drawing up of it. From what I have seen tonight, I think this is very favorable, just from my own personal. I'm pleased with the architecture and also with the greenery. And as you know, I'm a big advocate of greenery. I think that adds to the downtown. Certainly people who come here to visit and are driving around and see trees and shrubs and that type of aesthetic, I think is very important, much more important than the density. I just returned from North Carolina, where I had Thanksgiving, And the thing I love about that area is there is so much greenery, and as you know, I'm a greenery person. So saying that, I would say suits my...
John?
I just want to jump on board with Donna and with Jeff, and because of the fact that I've lived in so many other big cities in this country and had the opportunity to travel to many of them, Jeff, you're exactly right. The bank thing, and not lost on me, is the fact that you're talking about all these other banks that you're building around the state, 4,000, 4,400, 4,200. This one's 8,000 square feet. I believe you also said that you currently have about 12 to 13 employees, and you're looking at 10 employees, and you're looking to go up to almost 20.
Right.
So you're building a bigger bank. You're going to increase. I'm not saying it's a significant thing where somebody's going to come in and say, "Oh, look, they're bringing hundreds of jobs in," but you're still increasing, and that's showing commitment. That's the kind of long-term thing that we should be looking for buildings in this area. So I just wanted to say that I'm on board with the last two people who had spoken on this.
Gary?
I just wanted to spend a couple minutes at the most. It's been said that we should stick to what was developed many years ago. I am personally very, very conservative in regards to that type of thing. However, if we go along that philosophy, why are we updating the zoning code? Why do we have building standards that we have ability to verify? You know, there are many times plain developments. Plain developments are basically where you take pieces of various objects that you put into one plan, you know, and it's not consistent. So, you know, I think like other people have said, this is a good plan. It's probably the best, or one of the best plans that we will ever see, and that's the reason I'm supporting it.
Anything else before somebody makes a motion of some sort? Kathy?
Well, I seem to be the only one that doesn't appreciate the architecture, although I understand that it'll be an architectural statement, and that part will be very good. After hearing the presentation, I'm willing to waive the strong street edge factor because of the site problems. You know, and because of the fact that you have convinced me that you tried every which way to orient the building and it just didn't work. So we can waive that. I really don't want to say that it's consistent with the guidelines, so I don't want to vote on that. I don't want to say yes on that, but I'll vote yes on the plan review.
Just a quick correction, it's 10% on the square footage. Ed, I know you said .01, I think you meant .10.
No, I was going with, they've got floor area ratio here, .01, target ratio of .65.
Right, it's .1.
It's .1. I think there's a typo in there. It's 10. I just asked
Pretty
before, I said, I don't know how you got
.01, that's...
Yeah, it's 10%.
You're building it on a thimble, that's a pretty cool deal.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering, can we just modify A to say that the proposal is not consistent with guidelines for this project? I mean, you know, and just say that this project does not meet the consistency of the guidelines.
Well,
I think we can separate.
we can vote A and B.
I'm going to make a motion.
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve A and B in separate votes. And then you can vote, right? You can vote yay if you find it consistent. You can vote no if you find it inconsistent.
And remember, the point behind A is not to stop something from moving forward.
It's
to
just,
be able,
it's a comment.
It's to be able to report out to the council,
It's advisory to the city
Right.
council.
to the RDA, and to the people, you know, the citizens that...
People need to make that distinction.
Exactly.
So,
I'll second that motion.
okay,
to
it's
divide
been
the
moved and
question.
seconded that we separate the two in the final vote. Any discussion on that motion? Could you call the roll on that to see? We're moving to vote separately on A and B.
Wait, we're voting on whether to vote separately?
Isn't that what you proposed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure I know.
It's getting
I
late.
was confused too.
Cummings?
Aye.
Crop?
Aye.
Gray?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Boyce?
Aye.
Bowen?
Aye.
Thomas?
No.
Hintz?
No.
Wojtek?
Aye.
Motion carried. 7-2.
So now, option A, does anybody want to make a motion to approve that? Change it?
I make a motion that this project is consistent with Phase 2 development guidelines.
Second.
There's moved in second, any discussion on the motion? So an aye vote is to say it's consistent, a nay vote is to say it's not consistent. So with that, call the roll.
Cummings?
Nay.
Nay?
Nay.
Make sure I got it right. Crop?
No.
Gray?
No.
Lori?
I'm not sure that I'm understanding the vote.
Voting
I'm just voting on A.
Voting on A.
Do you believe this proposed development is consistent with the redevelopment area Phase 2 development guidelines? It's a no.
Boyce?
No.
Bowen?
No.
Thomas?
Yes.
Hintz?
Aye.
Wojtek?
Aye.
Motion denied, 6-3.
Now, do we have a motion for B?
I so move.
Okay, is it second?
Second.
Moved and seconded.
With conditions,
With
obviously.
that. All right, let's call a roll on that.
Cummings?
Aye.
Crop?
Aye.
Gray?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Boyce?
Aye.
Bowen?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Hintz?
Aye.
Wojtek?
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
Is there any other business you'd like us to attend to today? Okay, we can move to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Workshops.